Good evening. I'd like to call the Town of Stonington Planning and Zoning Commission to order for the regular meeting. This evening we have Ryan Deasy is absent, as is Lynn Conway. So this evening our two alternates up for being on the board will be Marge Salinger, Andy Meek, including with Chuck Sheehan, myself, Ben Philbrick, Fred Dykman, and Gary Belkey will join us for a public hearing later on in the evening when we continue our gas station. So, Keith. No, excuse me, before we get to Keith, is there a motion for the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Fred. Do we have a second?
Abstain.
You abstain, yeah.
I have to abstain.
You have to abstain. So
I second.
Thank you, Gary. All those in favor? Aye.
Abstain, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chuck. Keith, do we have correspondence this evening?
No correspondence. So the first thing would be the old business item 6, item 6A, PZ 2222, SBA and CAM, Town of Stonington, DPW, site plan approval and coastal area management review applications for construction of a 50 by 80 foot fabric style salt shed to replace the existing salt shed. Proposal includes site grading, loam and seeding and paving. Property located at 86 Alpha Avenue, Stonington, Assessor's Map 79, Block 1, Lot 24, Zones RM 20 and LS 5. And we have our Director of Public Works, Barbara McCrell, here, and Tyler Cofolice, the consultant from Weston and Sampson.
Want me to make a statement at this point?
I'm sorry, I missed that. I was trying to get the speaker to work more effectively. What was that, Keith?
Oh, I was just introducing Barbara McCrell,
I'm sorry, yeah, Barbara,
Director
step
of
right up,
Public
please.
Works.
I assume you would step up.
Hi, good evening, my name is Barbara McCrell. This is the first time I've been to this meeting, but I've been here working with the town for 8 years.
Welcome to the club.
Excuse me?
Welcome to the club.
We have a presentation if you'd like to see it. Would that be helpful?
Sure. I shouldn't speak, is that all right with the board?
Sure.
Fine.
You say that really, my name is Tyler Cofolice, I'm with Western Citizen, project manager helping Barbara with this project. So I'm just going to do a brief presentation overview, just to get it on the same page, and then feel free to stop me at any time. This should be a conversation that we can have, and this presentation will just help guide the conversation. So again, this is the DPW salt shed, replacing the old one at 86 Alpha Avenue of the Stonington DPW site. And my name is Tyler. So, starting off with site overview, this is just to get people oriented. So, along the bottom of the screen is Elm Street, where the town hall sits in purple. And then in the middle of the blue is the town garage and the town with the storage garage. Off to the left is the wetlands, and adjacent to the wetlands is in red is the existing salt shed that's being replaced. The orange in the top left corner is the coastal management region that overlaps the property. Along Alpha Avenue, that red strip is the 30-foot easement for the electrical company. And up in the top right in yellow is where the proposed cell shed is being proposed. So if we zoom in on our plan, you have the salt shed located on pavement in the gray area. Off to the left is proposed bioretention basin to treat the stormwater generated from the increased impervious. From an environmental or erosion control standpoint, we're proposing to line the downdraining portion of the site with erosion compost filter tubes, and then all of those catch basins highlighted a lot of inlet sediment controls and sediment removing site. The basin size for to store the 88 meters long and that large storm to sheet flow up the page to that blue highlighted catch basin on top of that. The dimensional requirements from the bylaws are highlighted on top of that. The residential district has a 30-foot yard setback, which we're meeting because we're outside of the 30-foot easement. We also have a 10-yard side yard setback and a 40-yard rear setback. And then on the next page, we'll talk about the roadway in that section of the proposed building. So this is the proposed salt shed section. We have galvanized steel framing superstructure sitting on top of a 6-foot tall concrete wall. It's going to be the building height based on the way the zoning regs read is 26 which is underneath the 30-foot threshold. And this is the average of the height and the overall height. In the front of the building, there'll be a 16 by 26-foot opening. This is going to be the side of the shed facing away from the road. And this is just a preview or a street view rendering of what we are proposing at the site. So currently, if you go there today, you'll see this is driving towards the downtown area, and the site will be on your left. You'll see the DPW crowd and the tour island over there. And then this next page is the proposed rendering, showing the vertical wood siding, the fabric roof on top of the concrete block wall. And one thing that this does not show is the proposed landscaping that was recommended by the architectural design review board. So we have updated that plan to show shrubs along that corner to help screen the shed in that direction. And just to give a little more detail, we're proposing azaleas and coastal, don't have tremendous apologies, it's a shrub that looks like this. So on the left is the flowers of the shrub, and the center is what it overall looks like. The leaves turn in the fall on the right. So this bush will be interweaved with this next photo. The azalea bush. It has pink flowers. That'll, pretty up the salt shed from the street. So that was a brief overview of the salt shed proposal. If you guys have any questions or comments?
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Fred?
Yeah, one question. I wondered when I saw the material you submitted earlier, why the building is out at the front of the property directly across from a residential neighborhood when you've got considerable amount of land there. I wondered why that's the best place for the building.
So, for a couple of reasons, on the overview on the left-hand side of the photo, there's the wetlands. So we're trying to move the salt operations outside of the title zone and the wetlands. And we also did a master for we were also hired to do a master plan for the DPW to make sure when we construct the salt shed that it wouldn't conflict with potential future growth of the DPW facility. So that location both worked with a future expansion and also worked for the existing, operations at the site. So those are the two main reasons why it's located where it is.
And what is the roof material made out of?
So it's if you think of like a boat tarp or a winterizing, it's like a really heavy duty fabric material that's, prevents water from going into the shed.
How many millimeters thick is that, do you know?
I do not.
How long do you think it'll last?
You can expect them to last anywhere from 15 years to, we've seen them go 50 years. Sometimes they can get nicked or need to be replaced if they get nicked by, a loader or operator. But we designed it to have a higher, taller than average height to prevent that kind of damage from happening. Sorry about the speaker.
That's not your fault. Any questions, Gary?
Are there any lights on it?
We're proposing lights on the inside and one above the front entranceway that'll be pointed straight down.
To be used when there's a salting operation and otherwise not?
Yeah, sometimes they'll be doing the salt operations at night whenever storms come around. They got to get out there before people go to work.
Okay.
Andy, Marge?
No effect on the property line or beyond the property line from those lights?
Say that again?
No effect beyond the property line? Yeah, I don't see a photometric plan here, maybe there is one, but I don't see it.
No, there'll be no, the limit of work will be within the property itself.
And the lights are dark sky compliant lights?
Yep, we can submit a cut sheet that we show. They point down and won't extend past the property line for sure.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion about this application?
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Oh, excuse me.
recommended stipulations on page 15 of the report. Number one is just prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, final plan shall be signed by the commission and recorded. Number 2 and 3 have already been met with revised plans they just submitted, but for the record, its final plan shall include street side shrubbery wrapping around the northeast corner of the building. Number 3 final plan shall include a note referencing the relevant FEMA map. And the town engineer requested number 4, which is just final plan shall be reviewed to the satisfaction of the town engineer. His only comment was just to review the fine details of the basin. Otherwise, he had no issues with this and supports it.
Thank you, Keith. I don't hear a motion.
Motion to approve?
Thank you, Fred. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, and discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Was that, I'm sorry, was that for all 3, I assume, 4 stipulations?
Yes,
All 4
with a
stipulations.
stipulation, yes.
I should have clarified that in the beginning. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, that's it for old business, and so we have the public hearings next, and we were going to save 7A to the end here. Jeanette LLC, the gas station on 54 South Broad, to get through the what should be quicker public hearings first, which would take us to 7B, of course,
7B, please, Fred.
Stonington Pizza.
Okay. Pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut, revision of 1958, and all amendments thereto, and pursuant to the zoning regulations for the town of Stonington, Connecticut, Planning and Zoning Commission hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing at the Stonington Board of Education District Office, 40 Field Street, Pawcatuck, Connecticut, on Tuesday, July 19th, 2022, at 7 p.m. on the following applications. P 22211 SUP, Janet LLC, Z
No.
Cole,
No, we're skipping that one.
We're
We're
I'm
jumping
sorry.
right to B,
I'm sorry.
please.
Okay, so we'll move right on. Okay, P 2221 SUP. I'm gonna torture this. Forgive me. Evangelos Koukalaris, Atlantic Associates of Stonington LLC. Special use permit application for reduction of an indoor restaurant seating from 54 to 42, an addition of 33 seasonal outdoor seats. Property located at 530 Stonington Road, Stonington. Assessors map 99, block 4, lot 23C, zones GC 60.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, seated this evening will be Chuck Sheehan, myself, Ben Philbrick, Fred Dykman, and Andy Meek and Marge Salinger. The process, we will have a sign-up sheet by the door. If anybody wants to have input, pro, con, or general comments, and we'll first hear from the applicant. Then we will put it out to the floor for the public's input, rebuttal by the applicant if necessary. We'll have staff input, board questions, and we'll close the hearing at that point, and hopefully get to a vote this evening. So the applicant, please submit their ideas.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. For the record, I'm Theodore Ladwig. I'm representing the applicant, Angelo Koukalaris. I don't have any visuals tonight. I think it's going to be short and sweet. I dare to say everybody on the commission, almost everybody in this room, probably is aware of the Stonington Pizza. Angelo and Aggie Koukalaris have been operating a restaurant in this plaza since 1986. They've been in this current location, which was a former bank, since 2015, which was a special use permit that this commission granted in 2014. Actually, this is a reduction in seating permitting, which I don't always, advocate. However, there were 24 seats authorized under COVID special allowance and 54 indoor seats for a total of 78 permitted seats. We're requesting 75 seats, 42 in the interior of the restaurant and 33 outside. 29 parking spaces are required for the entire building and 63 spaces are available, leaving 34 spaces available for the restaurant. 25 parking spaces for the seating and 4 to 6 employees per shift. In addition, I would add, as you saw in your staff report, most other building tenants do not have evening hours, therefore limiting parking demands during the restaurant's dinner hours. The restaurant and the patio, where the outdoor seating is proposed, is located at the northern end of the building and furthest removed from the adjacent residential use to the south. The commercial activity is further screened by 20 to 22 mature arborvitae type plants, 10 to 12 feet high. It's bounded by Route 1 on the north, the Shell gas station to the west, and the parking lot to the east. Interestingly, timely, today's lead editorial in the New London Day speaks to this situation. The New London Day makes the point that outdoor dining has become very popular and is here to stay. It goes on to recommend concrete bollards to protect patrons from traffic on adjacent roadways. This location goes that one better, or I should say 14 better. There are 14 mature trees along Route 1, each at least 2 feet in diameter and 15 to 20 feet high, providing a buffer from any incursion from Route 1, such as was seen at a restaurant in North Stonington not too long ago. A petition in support of this application was circulated 5 days last week and gained 187 Stonington residents in support of this application and numerous residents of other towns. Tonight, I handed in a further 30 signatures on petitions which were gained on Sunday afternoon last. I would submit that during the last 6 years they've been operating here, and the last 2 years with the outdoor seating, there have been no issues, no complaints, no traffic problems, and I would respectfully ask your approval according to the draft approval motion of the staff report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Mr. and Mrs. Koukalaris are here. If you have any questions that you'd like to direct to them, they're here as well.
Any questions?
What sort of protection are there for the patrons from the, on the east side between them and the parking lot? As I recall, that North Stonington incident was not a car on the highway, it was a car in the parking lot.
Well, actually, it was a truck that came off the highway, off of Route 2, into the parking lot.
I stand
And the protection from anybody coming off of Route 1, they'd have to go through these 2-foot diameter trees to get into the parking lot, to get into the patio. Obviously, those trees were planted long before outdoor dining was thought of there. But I submit that those trees are a better buffer and a more environmentally friendly buffer than concrete bollards, although that's what the New London Day suggested, which I don't fault that. If you need the protection, the concrete bollard will do it, but we haven't there 14 of them.
When do they expect to be open, like May to October? When would it be closed, even the outdoor seating?
Angelo?
Hi, my name is Angelo. I'm the owner. I'm sorry, the question was
When would you expect to open all year round for the outdoor seating? Or then it would
basically between April and November.
Thank you. And is there any concern for a little one to run into Route 1? I mean, I know the trees would stop traffic, but I don't know, because kids could be kids sometimes. Is there any?
We're about 50 feet away from Route 1, and we have a lot of big, thick trees between us and Route 1.
Okay,
So I feel it's completely protected.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ted. We normally have a site plan with this, with an application like this, so forgive me, I'm not as familiar with this location as I should be. How much of the area inside of the 3 to 4 foot tall evergreen hedge that's shown is actually existing pavement now? Or is that a new patio to be built?
The evergreen hedge?
The dining area that's proposed for outdoor seating is shown to be bounded by a 3 to 4 foot tall evergreen hedge. So the question is, how much of the patio inside, which is the seating area for the new 33 outdoor seats, how much of that is existing patio? How much has to be poured? How much has to be built?
I don't think anything has to be built. What is being built on is the old drive-through for the bank drive-up window.
I see that, but does it have to be recontoured or normally we have a site plan that answers these questions. In this case, I don't know if it's in the middle of a parking lot or because there's a drive-through there.
There is an existing patio though already, is that what you're asking? There's a partial existing patio.
Is the patio protected somehow from vehicular traffic once they get on site?
Once they get onto the patio,
No, once vehicles get on site and they have the ability to, let's say, drive into this. They have the ability to go through the drive-through.
There's a berm there.
The
but-
old
Nope.
drive-through entrance is blocked off now. You can no longer
Thank you.
take a car into there.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at this now.
While Chuck's reviewing that, I have a question concerning the large trees you've mentioned. Are those black pines? Do you know?
I thought they were hardwood, but they're not.
They're not.
I was out there, this afternoon counting them. And they don't look like Norway spruce, which I'm familiar with.
They're not.
I don't know what the precise type of tree is that they are, except that they're thick and they're tall.
I'm pretty sure they're black pines, and I noticed a couple are dying.
They what?
Are dying. Is that a fair assumption?
I'm sorry. There's two of them that are actually dying, but most of them are still big and
Are healthy?
healthy, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you take down the dead ones or leave the stumps
I have to
there
talk to
as-
my landlord. If he wants him to take them down, we'll take them down, yeah.
Well, maybe leave
I think that would be the safe thing to do.
them at 3 feet though, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Chuck, you.
I think this answers my question, thank you. Essentially, and I wasn't doing a very good job explaining it, but the drive-through lane that was previously there has been removed.
Has been removed.
So my concern was, if the drive-through lane was there, and some errant vehicle could drive right up to this, then we might want some additional protection, but it's removed, so it's not an issue. My thanks to Keith for sharing this.
Thank you, Keith.
No further questions.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you.
Is there, just for my own understanding, where we're approving a certain amount of outdoor seating, does that mean that the indoor seating is permanently reduced throughout the entire year, even when the outdoor is not in use? Is there a new?
That is the plan, that it'd be reduced from 54 to 42
Okay, so that
For-
would
for
be
12
a
months.
year-round change.
for year-round.
New layout.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any public comment on the sign-up sheet? No public comment? We'll put it out to the public. Any people like to speak in favor or opposed? General comments? Okay, hearing none. Keith, do you have some input?
Yeah, no issues here. I mean, the application meets the bulk and use requirements of the zoning regulations. Police Commission reviewed this and didn't see any public safety or traffic issues. And, you know, the one recommended stipulation is just that the town's maximum seating notice must be posted in a conspicuous location inside the restaurant, which is a requirement we have for all restaurants.
Thank you.
Should there be a stipulation about, we're kind of saying this is all safe because of the trees that are along Route 1? Do we want any stipulation that if those trees are ever removed for any reason, something else would need to be done?
Well, that's probably a good idea of some sort. But they are planting some evergreens in front of there. But that's going to take 20 years for them to be stopping a vehicle, I think.
So, I think if you leave the stump at 3 or 4 feet, you get an extra 5 years. But if somebody's doing 75 up Route 1 with a beer in their hand,
Right.
a 4-year-old stump is not enough for pine especially.
Well, I think, how many trees are existing now, did you say, Ted, of the large? 14. I think in the near future it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if they all die off, then we're in trouble.
If the landlord changes his mind about
I'm
Or
sorry.
if the landlord would change his mind about his landscaping choices.
Any other input from the board? Do I make that a stipulation?
I don't think it's a bad idea. The plan actually shows more than 14 trees.
No, those are new. The
Yeah.
plan is new planting.
Mhm.
They're existing, I think they're Japanese black pines or something existing there now that are mature.
Mhm.
And about 18 to 24 inches in diameter. There's 14 with 2 that are dying.
You know, you could make that sort of stipulation about almost any project where where we're relying on trees or bushes or something to be, you know, as buffers, or in this case, as protection for, I think that's getting a little far out there myself.
Okay. Yeah, you guys have much more experience.
I would agree. I think for now it's fine.
Hmm?
I think for now it's protected.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Do I hear a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing?
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Chuck. Any discussion on before closing the
Closing
hearing?
the hearing? No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All righty. What's the commission's flavor of the night here?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve application PZ 221-5 SUP by Atlantic Associates of Stonington as presented, subject to the conditions that Keith outlined in his presentation. And thank the applicant for a good presentation.
That would include the waivers?
I'm sorry, including the 13 waivers that are stipulated.
With the one stipulation of the special use permit.
Correct.
Thank you, Chuck. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Fred. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, commission members. And I mean to thank you for being here on a beautiful July evening. People say thank you for your service. Sometimes it sounds hollow, but I mean it for you too. Thank you for your service, for being here.
Thank you, Attorney.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Broad Street to the end. Broad Street to the end. Yeah. Right.
So 7C, is it?
Yeah. Okay. Next up, we have P 222165 SUP. Is that a 5 or? Yeah. Martin Olson Irrevocable Trust, Never Enough Bake Shop LLC. Special use permit for an on-premises full liquor sales permit for existing Blue Squid Bakery Cafe, property located at 27 Coogan Boulevard, Building 16, Mystic, Assessors Map 164, Block 3, Lot 1/32, Zone TC 80.
Thank you, Fred. Well, nothing's changed since the last public hearing, but I'll run through it quickly. Is Chuck Sheehan, myself, Ben Philbrick, Fred Dykeman, and we have Andy Meek and Marge Salinger with us, who are seated. I think everybody's familiar with the process, so let's jump right into it. Is there someone here representing the application?
Good evening. My name is Amy Filippetti. I am one of the owners of Blue Squid and Never Enough Bake Shop.
Excuse me, would you mind speaking right into the microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Amy Filippetti. I'm one of the owners of Never Enough Bake Shop, doing business as Blue Squid.
I'm Gail Filippetti, co-partner.
I see.
We're looking to get a full use liquor permit for our restaurant. We're open 7:30, latest 4 o'clock on the weekends, essentially just to complement the food of our menu and just include a little bit more and invite some more people in. Potentially doing a few special events, but we don't have any look to opening late every day for dinner. Just more if we want to host like bridal showers, baby showers, engagement parties, and stuff of that sort. I said brunch. But yeah, any questions?
Commissioners?
So the plan is not to change the place at all, and just be able to serve some liquor?
Correct.
And it would be,
Yep.
there would be not a service bar per se constructed,
No,
no.
no
sit-down
plans to
bar.
add a bar for anyone to sit at. Just pretty small menu, trying to highlight a few locals and just like 3 specialty cocktails or something like that to choose from, and just beer and wine.
Chuck?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public input? In favor, opposed, general comments? Nothing? Staff?
No issues really, they're not really changing anything. It's any sort of liquor sales needs a special permit before the commission, even if they're not really changing anything with the business. Police commission reviewed this the other night and didn't have any concerns with it also. No recommended stipulations or anything like that.
They also would need a state permit, correct?
It would, you're right.
Yeah.
So is that a stipulation, the state permit?
We usually don't include it just because they really can't
Right.
do it without it.
Any other questions? Do we hear a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
Do I hear a second? Thank you, gentlemen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any discussion on this, or we'll move to a vote?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of application PZ 221 9SUP by Martin Olson, Irrevocable Trust, as presented. And it includes the waivers as indicated on page 37 of 44 in Keith's report.
Thank you, Chuck. Do I hear a second? Thank
Second.
you, Andy. Andy beat you to it.
Okay, good. I thought they were shy over there at the end of the table.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So moved. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving right along.
Okay, next on the agenda, P 22219 SUP, Martin Olson Irrevocable Trust, Le Petit Chow LLC, special use permit application for a cafe liquor permit for wine sales at Kitsch, an existing kitchen and specialty food store, property located at 27 Coogan Boulevard, Building 19A, Mystic, Assessor's Map 164, Block 3, Lot 1/33, Zone TC 80.
Thank you, Fred. And once again, nothing has changed. We have Chuck Sean, myself, Ben Philbrick, Fred Dykman, Marge Challenger, and Andy Meeks seated this evening. And I think we all know what the process is, and I'm moving things right along. Is the application? Here we are. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. My name is Dan Price. I own Kitsch. I'm probably going to be a little loud. We are about a 5,000 square foot kitchen store in Old Mystic Village. We're the center building right on the duck pond. We're looking to add a cafe liquor permit. We are basically developing a cheese shop with Mystic cheese, and we'd like to be able to sell some wine with that and do charcuterie boards and a bottle of wine to go for people in the hotel rooms. Most of the liquor sales we're going to do are going to be to go, not carry around drinking, but actually take a bottle of wine and bring it back to your room type sale. We're not changing anything in the store. The fire marshal had asked for a better site plan, which I gave him today, and he seemed happy with. We basically have, my outdoor deck is 9 by 16. We currently have 3 tables, 3 high top tables that have 2 seats each on it. We're not adding seating. We're not going to be staying open later. It's pretty much the ability to just taste some wine and do some wine and cheese sales.
But you could have a beverage on the high tops outside.
You could. You just can't leave the property. That can't leave the deck.
Right.
Correct.
I jumped in with my question. Anybody else have any questions?
So you're restricted to the property if you have open.
Correct. They basically can't leave the store. They can go out to the deck, but no farther.
Got it. Okay.
And we're not doing prepared meals or anything like that, so it's really just a very low key.
Mm-hmm.
We won't be open any later. Our hours will stay the same.
So again, no built-in bar type.
We currently have, I mean, my kitchen has a long countertop and whatnot when we do cooking classes.
Right.
But it's not going to be a bar.
Right.
So is the idea just to be able to allow customers who want to buy your to-go charcuterie board and bottle to taste
Yes.
it?
Yes.
It's not that you're aiming to sell.
Correct.
You just want to be able to give people a sample.
We were thinking like maybe do 6 wines every 2 weeks and just rotate them out and just do some really interesting boutique wines that people can try that you can't get it. I don't want to be a package store.
Yeah.
You know, I want it to be very upscale.
Yeah. Okay.
So the people, they'll get the wine themselves at that counter there and then go on to the.
One of my people will get it for them. Yeah.
But they wouldn't be taking orders?
No.
Chuck, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is there any public input for this application? One more time, all those in favor or opposed or general comments, this is your chance. Staff?
Similar to the other one we just heard, no zoning issues. The only difference is that because of the fire marshal's comments, just a recommended stipulation that plans shall be reviewed to the satisfaction of the Old Mystic Fire District. We're just looking for a more detailed floor plan.
Chief, I gave you today.
Right, thank you. Other questions?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Thank you, Fred. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chuck. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of order. I may have cited the wrong application number when we approved the last application. So to the extent that I may have said PZ 2219 SUP, it was a syntax mistake from looking at these 2 applications together. That should have been PZ 2216 SUP.
Yeah. Easy to do with the same request on the same property
Yeah.
for 2 things.
By the same app. So, Mr. Chairman, I move approval of PZ 2219 SUP, Martin Olson Irrevocable Trust, Le Petit Chow, LLC, I'm sorry if I murdered that, subject to the fire marshal's condition and also to include the 14 waivers requested by the applicant, which are listed on page 42 of 44 on Keith's report.
Second?
Thank you, gentlemen. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
Thank you very much, ladies and
Good
gentlemen.
luck.
It's Le Petit Chou. That's my daughter's nickname. It's Little Cabbage in French. Just as, but everybody calls it Le Petit Chow.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now we're moving back.
Okay, and moving back to where I started originally.
Yes.
P 22211 SUP, Jeanette LLC, Z Cole, special use permit application to permit construction of a 1-story, 3,500 square foot convenience store with gasoline filling pumps and canopy. Proposal includes repaving, stormwater drainage, and associated site work. Property located at 54 South Broad Street, Pawcatuck. Assessors map 14, block 2, lot 6, zone LS-5. This is continued from June 21st.
Thank you, Fred. Seated this evening for this is Chuck Sheehan, has reviewed all the records, correct, Chuck?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I was present when this application was initially presented, and it was immediately closed.
Correct.
I was not present due to illness at the last meeting. I watched the video that was made available through the planner's office that covered the meeting from the introduction of the applicant all the way through the motion to table the application to this meeting. I had the benefit of that you didn't have, hearing things twice that I wanted to make notes on. So I feel fully prepared, having reviewed all of the other materials from the last meeting, all of the revised materials from this meeting, to act on this application this evening.
Thank you, Chuck. So it's Chuck Sheehan, myself, Ben Philbrick, Fred Dykman, Gary Belkey will be on as seated member because you were here for that first meeting, correct, Gary?
Yep.
And then the two alternates will be alternates. 4, that's fine.
Okay. It's okay with the applicants.
Okay, where were we?
Good evening. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, my name again is Attorney Zachary Cole, and my firm represents Janet LLC and its redevelopment of 54 South Broad Street, Pawcatuck. With me tonight is the licensed land surveyor on the project, Peter Gardner of Dieter & Gardner, the engineer, John Martucci of LBM Engineering, and Martin McKinney from Service Station Equipment, Inc. Tonight we're going to address some of the modifications that have been made to the site plan and additional submissions since the last meeting. I want to pause before we start to address an elephant in the room at the last meeting. Attorney Chase and Mr. Temple appeared before the commission on behalf of Alden Associates, who owns a competing gas station a couple doors down, doing business as Chucky's. The commission is aware, I think, that Mr. Chase and his client are challenging the unanimous approval, and again I'll say unanimous approval, of the Inland Wetlands Commission on this project. What the commission may not know is that Mr. Chase and a related entity, Savin Gasoline Properties 2, LLC, doing business as or leasing as a Chucky's gas station, has filed multiple actions to block a separate project by my client in North Stonington for a project under construction miles away from Chucky's. I'm sure the commission doesn't want to hear or be a part of the squabbles between these businesses, but I tell you this so that you're aware of where Attorney Chase and Mr. Temple and their client are coming from. This is a competitor that's trying to squash competition through local land use authorities. We've reviewed our project proposal and the regulations, and we're going to address changes that we've made to improve the project since the last meeting. Everything that Mr. Chase and Mr. Temple raised, though, what was said at the last meeting and tonight, should be viewed through the lens of a business competitor seeking to block a smaller operator that may hurt its market share. Now, that being said, our surveyor here tonight is Mr. Gardner. He'll walk you through some of the technical changes that we've made. I'll return to walk you through some of the items under the regulations and legal arguments. And Mr. McKinney will provide you with some perspective that he has as one who operates a fuel delivery and tank installation removal business. And Mr. Martucci will speak to the one outstanding comment from the town engineer. Keith may clarify this later, but the report for tonight indicated that there were a bunch of outstanding comments. We addressed the comments from the town engineer in our June submissions before the meeting resumed in substance. And we got one comment back that was about the turning radius going the entire way through the site. So we'll address that with testimony tonight. But first, Mr. Gardner.
Evening, Peter Gardner, Latimer Point Road, Stonington. The set of plans consists of 4 sheets. The third sheet shows what we're proposing to do.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get you your next page.
What we've done since last meeting is reduced the number of pumps. We had 4 pumps, we've reduced it to 3. All the pumps meet the setback requirements in zoning. When we were able to do that, we added a loading dock that we had previously discussed seeking a variance from. The loading dock is on the west-hand side of the property, and it's crosshatched. There was a question raised about the tanks that are underground. Following clarification from the owner, we are proposing 2 15,000-gallon tanks for the storage of fuel, and the detail of those tanks is on the right-hand side, and everything is to scale. Those are the only changes to the site plan, and those are the concerns that were brought up at the last public hearing. And if the commission has any questions about what we've done to the plan, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Where are these tanks located on the,
The tanks,
Here, I can
Exactly.
zoom for you. You speak, I'll,
right where they
Your
were
hands.
before?
yeah, they're in the same location.
tanks are in the same location. You see the shaded area right in the middle of the entire plan?
Yes.
That's where the tanks are. There's a concrete pad above them, and the tanks are, as I said, 2 15,000-gallon tanks with the detail on the right-hand side of this particular sheet.
So when a tanker truck pulls in, where does it'll be at the loading area and you use pipes to load to?
There's people more qualified to answer that than me tonight, and they'll be speaking later. I can't answer that question.
You can't answer it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the engineer?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, if I could, of Mr. Gardner, because it may be more appropriate for the surveyor, not the engineer. We're proposing or you're proposing a sidewalk easement, which is crosshatched on a portion of the plan. Is that sidewalk easement intended to go across the entire frontage of the piece?
What staff has asked us to do is honor the preliminary designs that the town has for sidewalks, and to set aside land for that.
So I'm just going to look at this plan, so I can see that.
Right at the top of this third sheet, there's a note about the sidewalks.
Yeah.
The town has a plan that was prepared December of 2020, and we were asked to show what could potentially take place there in the design the town's going to undertake, and then the town would do the construction of the sidewalks.
So I see the cross hatching on either side of the old drive, I guess that is. Is the intention to go from property line to property line with the easement?
Yes.
It is, okay. And that's where the sign approaches within that easement then?
Yes.
Thank you. I think, I have another question on the sign, but I'll wait till Mr. Martucci's going to speak to that issue, so I'll hold that question.
You didn't have the benefit, Mr. Sheehan, of the, I had some colors last time that better explained
No, I did have
that. Yeah, you could see, okay,
Thank
yeah.
you.
So the darker shaded areas, as I've been told by Mr. Gardner, is where it overlays the town's plan. And then the hashed area is just an extension of that,
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
right?
Thank you for that clarification. That is.
Yeah.
Correct?
I'm sorry. The town's plan did not include the hatched area, where we added that to the
Okay.
sidewalk.
But the intention is for the easement to go from property corner to property corner across
Yes,
the entire
yes.
frontage.
East to west.
Thank you.
You got it.
Appreciate that clarification.
No problem. So moving on to my piece, we've received the meeting summary report for this evening regarding the parking buffer. As the site plan was revised for tonight's meeting, it added 2 parking spaces because we had lost 2 spaces with the reduction in the number of pumps. You get to count each side of the pump as a parking space typically here in Stonington. We have, the applicant has decided, so what we were seeking then was a parking buffer reduction under the regulations. You have the comment from town staff about that. The applicants just decided to reduce the size of the building from 3,500 to 3,400 square feet.
Oh.
So that removes the need for these 2 parking spaces. With a 3,400 square foot building, you only need 17 spaces. You need 1 space per 200 square feet. And thus we only need 17, so we don't even need those 2 parking spaces. So the request for that reduction is no longer necessary.
But this plan says 3,500.
Yes, so this is because we got the report after submitting our plan, we are proposing to take a foot off of either side of the proposed building. So it'll be a 68 by 50 building that is 3,400 square feet. Related to that 3,400 square foot change to the building is the signage allowed, which we've addressed at multiple points. Your regulations allow a 1/2 square foot per linear foot of facade for the building, front facade of the building, with the front now being 68 linear feet. The applicant's entitled to 34 square feet of wall signage, which is what is already depicted on the plans. We were a foot under what we were allotted. The applicant would be willing to, if the commission deems it necessary, since we're looking at a 3,500 square foot plan, a stipulation stating that the reduced size of the building in the final plans will be 3,400 square feet, 68 by 50, and reflected on the final site plan. Questions on that point? Because I know it was...
So that'd be stipulation number 8, 68 by 50
Yep.
building. Thank you.
Moving on to the canopy, as I think Mr. Gardner touchingly talked about, was we've reduced the number of canopies, thus the size of the number of pumps. I'm sorry, the number of gas pumps has been reduced. Thus the size of the canopy has been reduced as well. It is 60 by 24. The canopy logos and signage that are in the packet haven't been updated, but consistent with our June representation and letter, the canopy should be treated as its own structure under the signage regulations. As staff report indicates, that's common within the town. The signage will comply with those signage limits, which would allow up to 30 square feet of signage, applying the same standard, that 1/2 per linear foot, without protruding above the roof line as the drawing does. The applicant, again, is willing to, as I stated last month, the applicant is willing to accept a stipulation to this effect if the commission deems it necessary. So a 30 square feet of signage on the canopy with the Sitco logo, the triangle, not projecting above the roof line. You also have water and will serve letters from the Stonington Water Pollution Control Authority and the Westerly Water Department, indicating that the proposed development can be served by existing connections. This substantially complies with the zoning regulations and meets the objective of ensuring that the property may be served by these systems. As such, we don't believe a waiver is necessary for those studies, but if you require a waiver, one has previously been requested. So the loading berth that we've added due to the reduction in the number of pumps, we've provided space for the convenience store deliveries. The fuel deliveries, as will be testified to here shortly, must be made by parking on top of the tank pad. The applicant will work to schedule those deliveries off operational hours, We had previously said after 8. We will do them after hours between midnight and 6 a.m. And Mr. Martin McKinney is here now, and he can discuss fuel deliveries and underground storage tanks.
Just started with these glasses, guys. How you doing? My name is Martin McKinney. I own service station equipment, Shelby Transport. I started it 30 years ago. I put in thousands of underground tanks. I delivered millions of gallons of fuel. I'm also not used to being this side of the thing. I'm chairman of Griswold Inland Wetland Zoning Enforcement. So I got roped into this little deal today. So with that being said, I'm here to answer any questions as far as I'm going to wing it. I'm not going to read. I'm here to answer any questions that anybody needs to answer about delivering at night, sitting on top of tanks. Sitting on top of tanks that's why they put cement pads on it. Every oil company in the world delivers on them. That's why they're all made of cement. If you go by any gas station you see, it's an oxymoron. So basically, I'm here for any technical questions anybody needs to be answered on the building of a gas station, or what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and I'll just call it like I see it. And anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So I'll sit here. Yes, anyone wants to yell at me.
Mr. Kenny.
Sure.
Does the position of the delivery vehicle have to be symmetrical with the loading area? In other words, should it be parked right on that pad?
Well, there's two things. I'm just being honest. Drivers are going to do whatever the heck they want to do, no matter what we set up to do in life. So they're going to come in and exit because if it's easier, they're going to come in and exit. But the reality of it is, yes, we're going to set up, the traffic pattern is perfectly fine for a tractor trailer. All the manholes on there are load carrying. The cement is 8 inches thick with half-inch number 4 rebar, 12-inch on center, so there's not going to be settling, there's not going to be any issues. So that's basically a traffic pattern area regardless. You know what I mean? Whether a delivery truck drives on it, a trailer truck drives on it, or anybody drives on it, it's like a piece of asphalt.
I'm more concerned with, is the truck normally positioned right on the loading?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, because if you
make a vertical drop right into the...
Well, it's within 20 feet because I have a 20-foot hose. And some guys go on the backside, some guys, most tractor trailers you can offload on either side, but it's within 20 feet. It could be on top, it could be 20 feet out. Like I said earlier, all these great plans that we're proposing, everybody's going to deliver. I'm just being straight up with you. They're going to deliver wherever they see fit and whatever they're going to do. But they will try to follow the rules as best they can.
Are you familiar with ASHO designation of trucks, WB50s, WB62s?
Is that a DOT regulation or which?
It's a federal highway regulation.
I should be because I own 25 of
This
them.
may be more appropriate for Mr. Martucci, so I'll reserve the question until.
Okay. Can I wing it? What's the question so he can prepare himself?
What is the length? Yeah, give him a heads up.
Give him a heads up. That's what I'm trying to do.
And that's fair. What is the length, the usual length of a fuel delivery vehicle?
Well, I can tell you that because I own them. It's usually 30 feet on the tractor and 40 feet on the trailer.
30 feet on the tractor and 40 feet on the
trailer. But then they butt up a little bit, so.
Okay.
But it's a bridge. Everybody's trying to expand it because of the bridge laws, if that makes any sense, because it's a long story. So as delivery, we want it as small as possible, but the state of Connecticut wants us to spread the load out further than possible. So you can carry 80,000 if you bridge out. When they call bridge out, it's 50 feet long. So they're making you expand stuff versus.
You're talking about the chassis?
Everything.
The overall length.
Yeah, overall length.
Distance between the axles.
Yeah, so you know what I'm saying.
I do.
Right, so.
Thank you, that answers my question. Appreciate your input, sir.
And Mark, do you have any concern about if one of your trucks was delivering? Do you have any concern about a truck making its way in?
Not with what's proposed with the evening deliveries and with not at all.
I have one question. When delivery's made, say it's made at 2 in
Sure.
the morning, does someone have to be there from the gas station?
No, it's usually the driver and most of the, because just so everybody knows, there's usually an external overfill alarm that's outside, that's outside by the fills, by the vents, somewhere externally. So if there's an overfill situation, first off, the alarm goes off at 85%, then it flags, and then there's a positive shut off at 95% with a float in the tank. So there's two mechanisms. There's an audible alarm, and then there's a physical float that shuts the flow of product off. So the worst scenario is the truck is going to have a half a load on there and he can't get it off because there's a physical valve that shuts off in every tank that won't let him deliver the product to the tank. And that's required by EPA standards and DEP standards today.
If you think of any questions, he's here with his expertise. Lost my clicker. There we go. One thing Mr. Martucci was going to come up and just talk briefly about that, as Commissioner Sheehan had mentioned, was about the getting into the site.
Good evening, John Martucci, licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, live at 11 Halley Lane, Colchester. The town engineer, Chris Greenlaw, had asked about turning templates entering and exiting the site, and I prepared for him a drawing showing WB50s coming in and getting out of the site. We had to widen the entrance and the exit to 34 feet wide so that they wouldn't exiting, they wouldn't go into the oncoming lane, and entering the same thing, wouldn't have to take it wide. Later on, he had one comment left. He just questioned about turning abilities inside the site, and as previous speaker said, there is no problem. Especially once we reduce the number of pumps, there's plenty of room inside the site.
And, excuse me, for the layman, what is a WB50?
It's a 50-foot wheelbase tractor trailer truck.
The delivery truck, the tank
Yes.
truck.
And that's on the larger side that we use in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah. And you see no problem taking that eastern exit?
No. Because
What path does it take, John? When I'm sorry, I know Mr. Martucci from working with him for years. We have had no conversations about this, but I haven't seen him in 20 years. I still feel like calling you John. I'm sorry, Mr. Martucci. So we see on this sketch, I presume you prepared this sketch, WB50 turning templates are RH in, RH out?
Yes.
Right hand turn in, right hand turn out. The question is, this shows it's able to clear the curb and the island between the pumps. And how does it get from that position onto the pad? Is it like a reverse turn that it makes?
Well, he will be, yes. First of all, again, he's delivering between midnight and 6 a.m. So nobody's in, the facility is closed. So he can jockey around to get it. And the presentation that you have there has 4 pumps.
Right, I see that.
And then we reduced it to 3, and we have the 50-foot offset to the property lines on either side. So there's more room now than that. I didn't make a new one. I didn't have the good.
That's okay, you don't have to, I understand,
Yeah.
I understand, but what I'm trying to figure out is how he maneuvers on site to get into the position that it shows the truck in, being able to safely turn out.
To turn out?
Yeah, so in other words, do they drive over the gas tanks?
Yes, yes.
And are they able to make that maneuver based on the position that they're in when they, because they barely clear that curb. Looks like it does clear the curb coming in. But can they make that left-hand turn then
To head out.
to get into the, and to get into, I'm sorry, but I'm just gonna make reference to this sketch. And for the record, I'm looking at this WB50 turning radius map that was submitted by the applicant. So as you look at this, it shows the truck pulling in.
Correct.
And then the question is, how does it get into this position? Because it looks like it would have to do some sort of a K-turn or something to get into that position.
And he may have to jockey around, and again, the facility's closed, and so he might have to stop, back up, and position himself.
So, but in doing that, he doesn't have to back up out into Route 1?
No,
Okay.
no, he can
It
pull
looks like
ahead.
the dumpster enclosure might be in trouble.
Possibly.
Well, he also has the loading space. There's a lot of pavement out there, so.
You know, this WB50 shows a cab of 21 feet and a, looks like a trailer of 34 feet. Is this a WB50?
Yes, and you may be able to see some of the writing. I don't have.
I could see the labeling. You know, the distance from the front axle to the front of the vehicle.
Right. It's an AASHTO WB50 template.
Is it in fact a WB50 that we should be using here, though, or should it be a WB62?
I always
because I think Mr. Kenny might have described a WB62 with a 30-foot cab. Overall, it's a longer truck.
Right.
And some of the published information that I looked at on typical fuel delivery vehicles, they're WB62s.
Okay, I typically use the WB50,
Yeah,
but that's just from doing it for 100 years. But
I always have also, but I think that may be superseded. So there's a question, I think, as to whether this is in fact the design vehicle
Doable.
that we should be overlaying on here, or should it be in fact some other designated vehicle which more accurately reflects what. And I'm just going from a reference that
right.
I read today when I was reviewing some of the updates that came in, and I think it might be a WB62.
I'll have to research that and
Thank you.
check it out.
Can I keep going, Mr. Martucci? That's okay.
And just, if I could just interrupt for a second. I just want to say that I did talk to the town engineer today, and he had the same concern you were talking about, which is that the turning template shows the trucks going in, coming out, but not really what happens in the middle there.
Yeah.
So that's what he was getting at with his comment.
My assumption was that it was open, though. My concern was that the gas station was open when this delivery took place, and that somehow the truck entering might be blocking, the entrance of either an emergency vehicle or a fire truck. I realize there's another way of getting in if there was an emergency, but that truck might somehow be blocking that entrance. But if the facility is always closed and the deliveries are always made, which I guess this industry can operate that way, that they can stipulate, times of deliveries. You see so many commonplace deliveries of fuel at fuel stations, and it always makes me nervous.
Right.
When I'm there, so I notice them.
Right. Usually.
Where they're dropping fuel, at another time of day. But I guess if you schedule it, then maybe that's not so unreasonable. But again, I question whether we're looking at the right vehicle based on the dimensions that Mr. Kenny gave us. And if the vehicle on this turning path can reasonably make that U-turn to get into the position shown to make a safe egress out onto the road. It looks like it ends up on the other side of the street making that turn, but, I guess he has a pretty good sight distance there, and based on the time of day, it may not be an issue.
Right.
So,
And I'll look into that, with the WB
I
62.
appreciate that, thank you. So, my other question is, and I realize now that you need the full width of the driveway opening to get the larger vehicle out of that throat, so, but normally when it's right turn only, their curbing channelizes, the direction of the vehicle leaving a right turn only exit, so that the vehicle has a very difficult time making a left turn. If
Right.
you don't have that in place, then people just make the left turn. They ignore the sign and make the left turn. I'm not saying I do it myself, but I see it all the time. So,
They have cameras everywhere
I guess
now.
the question here is could this be fixed by some sort of a mountable curb that maybe the truck could easily transcend, but the vehicle, like a Cape Cod curbing that.
I've seen that done where they have a lower curb.
Yeah, and it's almost like a rumble strip, that a
Right,
driver wouldn't want to take
there's
a car across.
there's an etched pattern on it.
Correct.
In order to get the WB50s in there, we widened the entrance and the exit to 34 feet.
Right.
If you were trying to channelize them, then you would, make it narrower, less than 34 feet. It would be difficult to channel. We don't have a lot of room in that sidewalk area. There's not a big, thick island there, so to channel them, you would almost need to make it narrower again. Let the trucks.
What I'm saying is do it in such a way that it is mountable by a larger truck, but that
Right.
it wouldn't invite a passenger vehicle or an SUV to routinely drive over it. And then you're gonna be able to, basically by layout, enforce the right turn only.
Right. We could look at that. I've seen it done in many.
I think it's doable. So you would know better, and you can take a look at that. Next question is, right smack in the middle of the sidewalk easement is this sign on posts that I'm wondering if the applicant would be willing to relocate. It would be a tremendous disruption to his business if his sign had to be relocated as a result of sidewalk construction. So the request is, will the applicant, slide the sign about 5 foot to the south to get it out of the designated sidewalk easement, because that's a serious impediment. That column is a serious impediment to a future sidewalk. That's something for you to think about.
Yeah. So as the sidewalk plan is already designed by the town, it goes around. To some degree, they've planned to go around that sign. That's a prior non-conforming sign, based on your report for the evening, that allows internal illumination that we would also lose. So we're planning to reuse that sign, and the sidewalk plan that the town has bid out for accounts for that sign.
I'm sure you can understand my concern with narrowing the sidewalk to 3 feet when someone's coming down there, on a like a 5 foot sidewalk. So the preference I think would be to relocate the sign. So we're asking if the applicant would consider that. The rest of the commissioners have to think about this as well. But that was my thought.
If the commission is going to require it, the applicant would be willing to switch out the sign.
Thank you. Last question that I have, and I'm not sure if this is Mr. Martucci or who did the plantings in the, I'm not sure if it's a bioremediation basin, a detention basin, or what, but I'm gonna call it a bioremediation basin.
Yeah, the rain garden, yep.
The rain garden, right. And the issue is, what is the resistance? I realize that the water is being discharged through a storm scepter, which appears to be a hydrodynamic separator, not an oil water separator, a hydrodynamic separator. And the primary function of a hydrodynamic separator is particulate. It will also separate oils and greasy fats and whatnot, but its primary function is particulate. I don't think anybody's naive enough to think that some oil is not going to get through in a storm when this thing is surging. So the question is, what is the resistance or tolerance of the plantings to hydrocarbons, and were they selected for their tolerance?
I didn't put together the plant list. I believe that was Ian Cole, our wetlands biologist.
Okay.
So
it was actually, they were
Yes.
actually selected by the environmental staff?
correct. It wasn't me.
I would just want to make sure that they have high tolerance to there's a lot of information published on this subject about those species that do have tolerance, and I didn't see any of these species listed, but that doesn't mean they're not, and I'm not
Correct.
an expert in this category, but I just want to ensure that the species were selected for hydrocarbon tolerance. So, that might be a condition that appears that be verified.
So that's fine. Yeah, we'll look into that also.
I guess the last question, I said the last one was the last one, but it relates to the same facility, is why did you go with the hydrodynamic separator instead of an oil water separator?
We used that, I believe it does provide some screening of the oil.
Oh, it does, no question.
Yeah,
no question.
so-
It definitely does. But an oil water separator is more focused on oil water separation, and a hydrodynamic separator is more focused on particulate. It creates a vortex, and that's how it gets the particles to separate.
Correct.
The hydrodynamic separator does. I'm sure you know that. It's for the benefit of everyone else. But the oil water separator is much more effective on oil water separation, and that may, it would seem to me that if we're gonna look at protecting the wetlands, and the primary purpose of the function of that is to separate oil from water, we might want to consider should it be an oil water separator or should it be a hydrodynamic separator? That again, that's nothing I'm going to try to agree on tonight. It's just
Right.
something that we might want a further review and validation.
Yes, and I would look into that, and included with the plants to make sure that we have the proper ratio, because I believe we'd have the reason we have the hydrodynamic separator there is to give first treatment before it goes into the rain garden, because the rain garden has plants in it, and so that was the purpose of it. So I'll look into it
Thank you so much.
also. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
All right. So, moving on. The waivers requested in the file are permitted by the regulations. The applicant requests waivers of the archaeological study, scaled 3D rendering, and if the commission sees it necessary, the water and sewer studies. The school impact evaluation, flood hazard report, and phasing requirements are, in our opinion, inapplicable to this project. But if the commission wants a waiver request to address those, waivers of those reports / requirements have also been requested. Moving on. It was raised at the last meeting that a certificate of location approval is needed for before this commission can issue a special permit, and that a recent appellate court case had some relevance to this. That's not true. A certificate of location approval is required from the Zoning Board of Appeals under the motor vehicle statutes, not the zoning statutes. Our courts have made clear that a ZBA is acting as a special agent of the state in granting these approvals, and that they're not zoning matters. Nothing in the statutes or your zoning regulations require such certificates be obtained prior to the approval of this special use permit application. Nor would they, because they aren't zoning matters. The applicant will have to seek such approval from the ZBA after its special use permit application is granted. We next get to the continued use of the site as a gas station. The applicant has a vested right afforded by constitutional protection to operate its filling station as a legal pre-existing nonconformity with regard to the distance between filling or service stations. This right has not been abandoned, and I'll ask you to bear with me as I explain the law and apply it to this situation in a little detail. Pursuant to section 2.11.2 of the zoning regulations, no gasoline or diesel station may be erected within a 1,500-foot radius of any part of any lot used for those purposes. 54 South Broad Street is within 1,500 feet of the Sunoco station at 60 South Broad Street. However, the use, and there's a service station next door. However, the use of 54 South Broad Street within this distance is a legal pre-existing nonconformity. The zoning regulations were first passed in 1961, and it included an almost identical provision to this 1,500-foot requirement in section 4.73. According to an application and testimony before the Zoning Board of Appeals in 1963, Seymour Hindle explained that the property was being used and had been used as a gasoline filling station for approximately 10 years. Therefore, the use of the premises as a gasoline filling station dates to about 1953, 1954, before the enactment of the regulations. As such, it exists as a legal pre-existing nonconformity under the regulations regarding its proximity to other filling stations, which themselves predate the regulations or were built after the regulations went into effect. So, moving on, despite not operating for a number of years as a filling station, the applicant and its predecessors maintained their rights to operate the property as a gasoline filling station under this legal pre-existing nonconformity. Where nonconformity exists, our courts have held that it is a vested right which adheres to the land itself. This right is not forfeited by a purchaser who takes with knowledge of the regulations which are inconsistent with the existing use. Once a nonconforming use has been established, a nonconformity has been established, the only way it can be lost is through abandonment. The Commission's attorney, Mr. Londrigan, explained the law on abandonment well. As he stated, whether abandonment has occurred is a factual question for the Commission. As he said, in order to establish abandonment of a non-conforming use, there are two prongs to the test. It must be proven that there was a voluntary discontinuance of the use, and that the voluntary discontinuance was accompanied by an intent not to reestablish that use. I'll add that it's a well-established rule that before a nonconformity can be found to have been abandoned, there must be an intention on the part of the owner to relinquish permanently the nonconforming use. As Mr. Londrigan indicates, the mere discontinuance of a use where there is no intent to abandon is not enough. And I'll say that again because it's important. The mere discontinuance of the use where there's no intent to abandon is not enough. Abandonment connotes a voluntary, affirmative, completed act. Additionally, the temporary interruption or suspension of the use is not enough to terminate the right. Again, temporary interruption or suspension aren't enough to terminate the right. As Attorney Londrigan explained, even a hotel closed for 24 years, that period wasn't enough to relinquish the right to a hotel. The court found that it wasn't enough to relinquish the right to a hotel use where there was not an intent to abandon the nonconformity. Here, the evidence presented does not show an intent on the part of any of the owners to relinquish permanently the nonconformity of the premises as a gas station within 1,500 feet of another. The premises have remained in the ownership of gas station operators or lessors since the inception of the zoning regulations, since prior to the inception of the zoning regulations. The applicant, Janet LLC, purchased the property from PMIG Properties, a related entity to PMG, in January 2021 and immediately began developing plans and seeking necessary approvals to redevelop the property as a gas station and convenience store. According to an affidavit from the Vice President of Assets at Petroleum Marketing Group, Jeffrey Caro, PMIG never ruled out continuing to use and redevelop the property and never intended to relinquish any rights to the continued use of the property as a gas station. There's no evidence in the record to conclude that Hendel's Americana Realty intended to relinquish its rights to continue to operate the premises as a gas station within 1,500 feet of another. Sorry, just a second. Talking too much for myself. Other evidence fails to establish that Hendel's, also known as Americana, intended to permanently relinquish the nonconformity. Evidence presented at the last meeting indicated that 2 of the underground storage tanks hadn't been in use since 2009. This passage of time, though, until the sale to PMIG in 2018, isn't enough for abandonment. Remember, the non-use of 24 years wasn't enough where there was not an intent to abandon the right. There are other reasonable explanations for the Commission to infer, beside abandonment, that the property remained out of use, including the economics of redeveloping the site during a recession, the cost of redevelopment itself, and the balance of a sizable portfolio of gas stations that Hendel's Americana possessed. Hendel's Americana, their removal of the underground storage tanks also is not itself evidence of a voluntary intent to permanently relinquish rights to the nonconformity. As Attorney Londrigan explained, a Connecticut court has held that removal of fuel storage tanks is not in and of itself evidence of an intent to abandon a use of property as a gas station. The facts and circumstances surrounding the removal of the tanks matter. Here, according to the notification for underground storage tanks submitted at the public hearing, the tanks were removed in 2016, having been installed in 1987. At the time of the removal, these tanks had a 30-year life expectancy, and removal of the tanks would have been necessary to Hendel's or someone else's redevelopment or eventual sale of the property to another gas station operator such as PMIG in 2018. The tanks had to be removed, and pursuant to General Statute 8-2, the demolition or deconstruction of a non-conforming use, building, or structure, structure here being underground, shall not by itself be evidence of such property owner's intent not to reestablish such use, building, or structure. Accordingly, the removal of the tanks can't be seen as evidence of Hendel's intent to permanently relinquish its rights to the nonconformity. Hendel's did temporarily lease the premises to a roofing company, Coastal Roofing, Inc., and PMIG, according to the affidavit, didn't renew the lease or lease to anybody else. A reasonable inference for the Commission is that the lease allowed Hendel's to gain revenue from the property until it could redevelop the site for its own continued use, sell it to another gas station operator as it did in 2018. It took 2 years from the removal of the tanks for Hendel's to sell its group of properties to PMG. This temporary lease didn't relinquish rights to the continued use of the nonconformity, as a temporary interruption in the nonconformity is not enough. The evidence before the Commission establishes that neither Janet nor PMIG intended to relinquish the rights to the nonconformity that has been abandoned. And the evidence before the Commission fails to establish that Hendel's did either. Accordingly, the nonconformity has not been abandoned, and Janet has a right to continued use of the property as a gas station within 1,500 feet. I'll pause for any questions here, and then save my closing.
I have one. With regard to the 1,500 feet, both stations would have had to be pre-existing for that to work for them both, right? I mean, I think it's a Sunoco station that's operating now, would have had to have been there prior to zoning 2, or they wouldn't have gotten a permit.
Right, so they've existed all this time as well. So
they have. Okay, so
my understanding is there has been a gas station for some, I don't know the exact date. Their attorneys may be able to tell you. But my understanding is that they have been in, that site has been in existence for a long time. I know the town card puts it at 1982. So either they needed a variance then or it predated 1982 and predated the regulations itself. But we were existing in the location. So if someone else, prior to 1963, so if someone else came along while that setback requirement was, that 1,500 foot distance was in place, they would have needed a variance if they did it after 1961. We've been there all that time.
Okay.
Right?
Any other questions?
Not about that, no.
Okay. Public comment time. Okay. Mark Temple?
Actually, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'm John Chase, the attorney who represents the neighboring property owner that Mr. Cole had spoken about. And I was going to provide a little bit of an introduction for Mr. Temple and then as well add some information concerning some of his comments. And if you don't mind my speaking first, I just wanted to well, I've been doing this for quite a while. I've never really had quite the introduction I've had tonight. I just want to make perfectly clear. I am an attorney. I represent Alden Associates Limited Partnership. They are a neighboring property owner. I think it's 60 South Broad Street, but I could be mistaken as to that. And I just want to say, in respect to the introduction that you heard with respect to comments about doings in North Stonington and opposition to a gas station and so forth. You know, if we were in a courtroom, I would do what's called move to strike, because it's all entirely irrelevant. And I think I'd really sum up my response in this respect by saying that my client is a property owner in the town of Stonington and has the same rights that anyone else does to appear at a public hearing in favor or in opposition to an application. And more than that, the comment was made, there were facts, in fact, that are not in evidence that were alleged concerning matters in North Stonington and so forth, and that as a result, that you should view my presence or you should view my client's participation through the lens of a business competitor. What I'm going to ask you to do is to view not my presence, but this application itself through the lens of your zoning regulations. That's all I can ask. And I know that this commission will do its best to fairly do that. So without further ado, and having made my position clear, especially to you, sir, who weren't here, you were here last time, I know. I'd like to introduce Mark Temple, who will speak to his professional credentials, and then as well to his Mark, I'll let you speak. Thank you.
Thank you, John. For the record, Mark Temple, president of Leonard Engineering, 2210 Main Street, Glastonbury. I have a handout.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark.
So I was here last month. I spoke extensively as to what I felt were my concerns for this location. And tonight I'm back here again with what I would say are 5 concerns based on the application by Jeanette LLC for the proposed development at 54 South Broad Street. My first concern is that at the 6/21 P&Z meeting, I testified to the lack of specificity regarding the layout of the motor fuel underground storage tanks. The latest plan set shows a detail of a 15,000-gallon split tank. Unfortunately, there's no other design details showing fill locations, vent locations, spill buckets, product piping, nothing. That design that you see was downloaded in about 3 minutes from either Containment Solutions or Xerxes website and plunked onto that site plan at the appropriate scale. But there's no other pieces of that system that are shown on that plan. And I would say to you, I think that this commission deserves to be shown where all those other components should be. So that's number one. Number two, at the last meeting, I raised safety concerns, right? That was the concern that the delivery vehicles were all going to park in front of the store and block the operator's view of the dispenser pumps, creating a significant safety hazard plus a spill hazard. The applicant has now provided a 50 by 15 foot loading zone adjacent to the western property boundary. Prior to last month's meeting, the town engineer recommended that the applicant provide horizontal geometries adequate for tractor-trailer fuel supply in fire department emergency response vehicles. In response, the applicant provided 2 diagrams at 20 scale showing the entrance radii to the western curb cut from both directions, as well as exit radius to the east. Unfortunately, those diagrams are plotted on the old site plan dated May 31, 2022, and are not the most recent July 8, 2022 site plan that's been revised. They also were produced, I don't know how, I mean, I got them from Attorney Chase, but they're not at scale on the photocopy that I received. So I then went to the turning radius chart, and I've attached to the back of that turning radiuses for the WB50, right, for both right-hand and left-hand turns. And you can see that attachment, which, because I didn't have AutoCAD, his AutoCAD site plans, I took the turning radius and plotted onto that on my light table, the site features. Okay, that makes sense? And you can see that those turning radiuses just don't make any sense. If he's coming in order to, first of all, to get into the site, he has to come from the east. And he has to go into, obviously, the western entrance. Right, so in order to hit that landing zone, so we have 2 opportunities. Either he's going to stop at the landing zone and then deliver product to the tank some 45 feet away, or he's going to pull across the top of the tanks and deliver product. Now, I understand that, well, I'll first say that in order to hit the landing, that loading zone, he'd have to come down and you would have to block off the parking spots, probably the first 4 on the western end. Because that trailer is so long, he's going to have to pull straight down and then back up into that loading zone. At that point, you heard Mr. McKinney say, the truck hoses are 20 feet. Measure that distance. It's probably 45 feet to where the fills might be, assuming that they're on the west end, but you've got a 2-compartment tank. So the other fill for the other compartment's on the eastern side. That's 60 feet. So we're going to have gasoline hose laid across the ground to those tanks. That's the scenario for delivery during the day when the station is open. Now, the applicant has said, okay, he won't deliver during the day, he'll deliver at night after it's closed. Well, what happens at night when the station closes? The lights go off, right? The best lighting on that piece of property are the canopy lights. So those canopy lights are off. It's dark. Mr. McKinney said that the driver is going to do whatever the hell he wants. I think that was the quote. So I assume he's going to have a flashlight in his mouth when he's trying to do all of this work to connect hoses to get to the top of these tanks. Another concern is that the standard practice in this industry is for the driver to go into the store to make sure that there's enough ullage in those tanks so that when he drops that 6,000 gallons of regular unleaded, it fits in the tank. Guess what? The store is closed. That's where the computer system is, where he punches a few buttons and gets a printout and says, oh, there's 2,000 gallons of product in the tank, and the ullage, the empty space, is 8,000 gallons, or whatever the number is. So he can see that that product fits in the tank. The store's closed. So the only thing available to him is that he has to, maybe, he hand sticks the tank. So someplace either on his truck, which I hardly ever carry, or someplace on that store, maybe around the back, is a pipe with a hand stick. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not, it's dark. Now he's going to have to go get that stick and hand stick that tank and try and see where the gasoline wet spot is on that stick in the dark. God bless him, because he's going to do whatever the hell he wants. I think that's the quote. So besides the turning radiuses, there's a significant safety issue for delivering after dark. I think, so I think I made the point, you know, again, if he's in the delivery area or the landing area, it's such a huge safety issue to have fuel lines running across the pavement. He can't put out enough cones to prevent somebody from speeding in there and running over that fuel delivery line. The worst spills I've seen are those. That tank is dropping product at hundreds of gallons a minute. And you can think about what that spill might be. So now we're dropping product after midnight, somewhere before 6 a.m. It's completely dark. I just think the safety issues are huge. Notwithstanding the turning issues, which you said, you heard the engineer say, well, maybe it makes a K turn. I think they're 2 W turns. It's virtually impossible for him to make these turning radiuses in the site. I think you can see that on that drawing, that it's very difficult. The revised design plans show a 2 to 4 foot retaining wall that's going to be constructed along the western edge of the pavement, adjacent to the entire length of the loading zone. Unfortunately, there's no design detail for that retaining wall. The plan simply labels it as a, and I'm quoting, 2 to 4 foot gray retaining wall, and then in parentheses, quotes, maybe hollow block, unquote. I can only recommend that this commission get the applicant to stamp a design cross-section of that wall. I think there's issues with long-term failure of that wall potentially from these loading vehicles that are parked right next to it, and there's no way to know without having an engineer properly design that retaining wall. And I would urge you to make that, if you're going to approve this, make that a condition of your application, that you get a stamped design from an engineer. My fifth point. On the site plan that we have in front of you today, dated July 8th, there is an area to the south of the proposed building that's called out as reserved for mechanicals coolers, in quotes. This equipment is located within the upland review area. It's within, I don't know, 10 feet or so of the edge of the wetland. It was not on the plans that were approved by your Inland Wetlands Commission and Watercourses Commission, excuse me. And I don't see how you can approve this plan with those, whatever they are, I don't know what they are, right? But there's a call out on the back of that building for that equipment. And it's within that upland review area, and it's not on the plans that were approved by the commission. So I think that, notwithstanding the issue on WB 50 versus longer trucks, I think the longer trucks are probably an issue. I tried to provide the template that was used by their existing engineer to show that these turning radiuses are extremely difficult. And I think that there's safety issues for deliveries after midnight. I think they're very difficult to overcome. You know, maybe you can have a stipulation that the canopy lights have to be on 24 hours a day. That certainly would give him the light that he needs to safely make those deliveries. But I think, given the environmental concerns that we all have for lighting and dark sky compliant issues, that I don't think that that works. So I think those safety issues are forefront to a decision that you have. And I think that all in, unfortunately, this site is just too narrow. It may be deep enough, but it's too narrow to support this use. And I would urge that you reject this application. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Anybody have any questions?
One question, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, Chuck.
You indicated at the last meeting, you know, that you have extensive experience in this, and I appreciate you not going through all of it because it was very extensive. In your opinion, is a WB50 the correct design vehicle for the site, or is it a WB62 or 67?
I don't know that there's an immediate answer to it. It really depends. I think, as Mr. McKinney said, what the state of Connecticut is requiring or what the federal government is requiring. And I'm not that an expert to those issues. I tried to match what they had proposed to show that the smaller trailers, the shorter setup, tractor trailer setup, doesn't work. So if it's a 62 or longer, it's worse. It's much worse.
I understand that. I thought maybe you could shed some light on what is customary in the design field.
I think the customary in the past would have been the WB52.
That's always been my experience, but that isn't what I saw online.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else?
How common are the after-hour deliveries?
I'm sorry?
How common are the after-hour deliveries?
Well, he's got 2 tanks.
No, but industry-wide, is it?
It depends on his use.
No, and gas stations overall, you know.
It depends on how many gallons they sell.
Okay.
So, I mean, his answer is he would like to have deliveries 5 times a day because he'd be selling 200,000 or 300,000 gallons a day, right? That's what he wants. The reality is, I don't know, he may sell 2,000 or 3,000, maybe 4,000 gallons in a day. Most of it will be unleaded regular. I assume that the larger compartment in that tank, or both tanks, is going to be unleaded regular. Maybe they'll be siphoned together. There's no details on that. They could be siphoned together. So he'll get a lot of storage, but the answer is that I expect that they'll get a delivery 1 to 2 to 3 times a week.
out of average, 100 gas stations, how many get deliveries from 12 to 6 in the morning?
I've never designed one where that's been the situation. I designed the station, the Shell branded station at the seaport, the one across from the former, what's the restaurant?
Friendly's?
Friendly's, thank you.
Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, but it's all the known station. My firm designed that location. When it came before you, this was an issue. And the end result was that the conclusion was that those deliveries would be done during off-peak hours. Now that location is open 24/7. But they're not getting deliveries after midnight, I can tell you that.
Thank you.
It seems to me that gas stations, fuel in general, fairly heavily regulated industry. Are there any regulations pertaining to after-hour deliveries? Because it seems odd that something of such importance would be unregulated. If there was a very real reason that it was unsafe, you would think it would be disallowed.
So I think the answer is that regulatory body is here in town. It's the fire marshal, it's the fire department, and it's you making that decision. I don't think the federal Department of Transportation sets those standards. I don't believe it's in like NFPA 30. I don't recall it being in any, it's certainly not in the UST regulations. So I think the answer is not from a state or federal standpoint. I think it's down at the local level where, you know, people have a little bit better understanding of how things work in the town. I hope that answers your question.
I think so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Couple.
Any other comments from the public? Either for or against? General comments? I think.
Oh, it's John Chase again, unless you'd rather.
We have a hand raised in the background. I'm trying to.
Opposed to the application.
I'm an applicant, and my name is Amit Chaudhary. Again, I came last month meeting. They are our competitor next door. They take every step to stop us there. We compliance with the regulation and everything but town required. We spending 1 year in this application, bringing from the border to compliance, wetlands, and they are appealing. They're gonna oppose the commission, regardless, you know. They brought some issue about the gas delivery. I own 25 stations and they close at night. Only one station open 24 hours. And all the deliveries, a lot of time they deliver at midnight. The truck driver have their own lights at the truck. And if the commission wants, we can leave the lights on to the site. You can add to the condition, we can do that. But they keep coming back with the comments. We addressed all the comments last month. We addressed the town engineer today. We addressed pretty much all the comments. And they're gonna keep coming back because we are next door to them. That's the whole key is if they want to stop us that, they're gonna appeal to the court. They're appealing already to the wetland, wetland did a great job, approved my application. They didn't find anything wrong with that. So they're gonna go to against the commission anyway, regardless whatever it is. You know, I bought this property from PMG, and with the fuel contract, and we have to sell gas to this gas station. This is always gas station, and never been abandoned. Mr. Chase trying to abandon this gas station. It's not gonna happen. You know what I mean? If this deny application, I will come back again to whatever the requirement. I think I address all up-to-date requirement. That's all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think coming back again, as was just mentioned by the gentleman, is exactly the point that was made by Commission Member Conway last time, who's not here tonight. who I think made a fairly impressive point when she said, in essence, and I'm paraphrasing, when she said to one of the gentlemen here, "You've certified that your drawings are correct. Now tonight they've been shown not to be. Why would we want to hear from you again? Why would we believe you next time?" And so this is the problem with coming back again and coming back again, and Mr. Martucci is going to look into things, as he repeatedly said. But in any event, I wanted to address, just from a legal perspective, the comments made by Mr. Temple.
Can you use the microphone, please? Can you use the microphone, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. And I don't, actually, I think I can just stand right here. I thought that...
I think you can uncouple it.
You can hold it too.
Okay, well, it was my impression that the turning radius drawings that he had presented, following those that had been presented by the applicants or utilizing them, were on the easel here, but they're not. The legal response, the attorney's take on Mr. Temple's critiques is this: how do you enforce the promises that are being made last month, now again this month, by the applicant concerning the safety of the gasoline and fuel unloading operation? They're saying now that they're only going to take deliveries after midnight, notwithstanding, of course, the gentleman's comments that the drivers are going to do whatever the hell they want. If that is the case, and if it is the case that this commission is inclined to approve this application, I would respectfully request and suggest that all of those promises be reduced to conditions of approval upon which the validity of the resulting approval would be subject to. If the deliveries, in fact, wind up not taking place after midnight, if traffic is blocked, if all of these measures that are going to be taken are, in fact, not taken, what hook does this commission have to enforce? I would respectfully submit that the proper way to address that, if this commission is inclined, notwithstanding all that's been presented, to approve the application, that it be done specifically in the form of conditions of approval upon which the approval is specifically contingent, and not a scenario on which we're simply relying on complaints of neighbors, drivers, someone noticing the unsafe conditions of the hoses and so forth before something worse takes place. I think Mr. Temple made a comment, and I think it's certainly clear enough on the revised plans. There is really nothing specified as to how this unloading will take place. In other words, there's an unloading area, a delivery area, now shown on the west side of the site, as was discussed. And I believe one of the members, it might have been you, Mr. Sheehan, if not, I apologize, but the question was made, a question was made in respect to the trucks dropping their fuel at that location. We really can't tell from the drawings if there's some sort of a facility in that loading zone for the contents of the trucks to be dropped into a receptacle and piped under the ground to the tanks, or if, as Mr. Temple indicated, again in the absence of information in the plans, if the truck's going to put itself in that spot, or at least sort of try to get to that spot, and stretch the hoses then out across to where the tanks are. We simply don't know. And I'd respectfully suggest that if it is the former, if the intention is to have some sort of a receiving, and Mr. Temple, it is a remote fill. That's the word I was looking for. So, in other words, Mr. Temple's response, I think, indicates his familiarity with this type of a system, and then with pipes across to the tanks and so forth. If that's the case, I would draw your attention back again to section 2.6.2.2. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I would draw your attention to section 2.6 2.11.2, 2.11.1 rather, I think that's the last shot I'll take at it. No gasoline or diesel filling appliance shall be located within 25 feet of a street line or 50 feet of a side or rear lot line. So I think that's the concern about a remote fill, that in the absence of any defining language anywhere in your regulations as to what a gasoline or diesel filling appliance consists of, that a remote fill device would violate this 50-foot side lot prohibition in just the same way a gas pump would, which was the result or the reason the plan has now been reduced somewhat, as was indicated. I think in his written report, Mr. Cole refers to that as an oversight or an internal miscommunication or something like that. Mr. Cole's written submission, well, actually, let me say something else before addressing that, because since Mr. Martucci is here tonight and has agreed to look into some things, and I guess that assumes that the applicant is going to grant consent to continuing the public hearing for another evening, but maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm not sure how else Mr. Martucci would look into the half dozen or so things he said that he would. But Mr. Martucci was involved in an earlier stage of the application when it was before the Inland Wetlands Commission, and have here a copy which I'll actually going to.
Excuse me, Mr. Chase, are you going to be on for quite a while longer or a few more minutes? Okay. I was going to take a break if you want to keep on going. Well, no, I mean, if you're going to wrap it up. How many minutes? Well, no, how many minutes do you have left on your presentation?
Perhaps 15.
15?
Yeah.
Let's take a break, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
5-minute break, please.
Not at all.
I think we're all set to go ahead.
Actually, the applicant's counsel is not here. I think we should.
Well, the door was locked actually, so other person opened it, so they come.
I mean, I'd be happy to go right ahead, but I think it would only be fair.
We'll give them a couple minutes.
Sure, I understand. Yeah,
There they all are. That's a long 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. So I was, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was about to say something about, in regard to Mr. Martucci's involvement in this application. However, during the break, Mr. Temple did ask me to point out one more thing with regard to the trucks and safety and so forth. And I think that Mr. Sheehan, you made a comment much earlier tonight that had something to do with that. And that was with the issue of trucks having to maneuver to the extent that it's necessary to back even a bit onto Route 1, that would be a violation of your regulations with respect to the loading area requirements.
I don't think I said violation of the regulation. I said that it would be a safety concern.
Well, no, I'm saying that would be a violation of the regulations, but I think that, I don't mean to suggest that we did that, but I wanted that, and I know your town planner can point this out just as well as I can, but I believe that in the off-street loading berth requirements, there is a specific requirement that at 7.10.5.1.7, vehicle maneuvering necessary to utilize the off-street loading space shall take place within site boundaries and may not require stopping or backing to, from, or on any public thoroughfare wherever possible. So I guess the really question is it possible to avoid that situation? I mentioned before the break that Mr. Martucci had been involved at an earlier stage of the application before the Wetlands Commission. It's perhaps appropriate that there was some colloquy earlier, some back and forth about the storm scepter water system and the drainage system in respect to the site. Oh, I'm sorry. Um, As I said, at an earlier stage before the Wetlands Commission, Mr. Martucci had submitted a report of which I've given you a copy, and I note for purposes of the zoning proceedings tonight that the rain garden and the storm drain system paragraph that begins water quality about halfway through. The water quality volume is the volume of runoff generated by a 1-inch storm. The calculated water quality volume is 1.244 cubic feet. The rain garden's volume is 1.264 cubic feet, so just a very little bit more, below elevation 49.5. The rain garden will provide water quality improvement infiltration and infiltration before the runoff flows into the wetlands. And later on about the third or fourth page, where it says computations at the top, down about 1.5 inches, 2 inches above the bottom of the square area on that page, it says P equals design precipitation. 1 inch for water quality storm equals 1 inch. Now, I am certainly not here to speak to matters of stormwater management, control, cleansing, anything like that. But I would point out nevertheless that it seems to me that the Commission needs to be satisfied in accepting the calculations Mr. Martucci has provided to this Commission in accordance with what he provided to the Wetlands Commission earlier, that this Commission's regulations are also met regardless of what the Inland Wetlands Commission may have approved in respect to its own applicable standards. And I say that for this reason. Section 7.10.7 of your regulations, the zoning regulations, and these are found in the off-street parking section, states that at 7.10.7.1 that adequate data shall be submitted basing calculations and capacity on a 25-year storm. I'm no expert, but if the standard for what constitutes a 25-year storm is the 1-inch event that was addressed in the capacity of the on-site system presented to the Wetlands Commission, we get 1-inch storm events quite frequently. I think we would all agree. And again, I'm not an expert, but I think that the Commission needs to be sure, because it has a specific standard, capacity for a 25-year storm, that be met. The report presented to the Wetlands Commission showed a capacity of the rain garden, again, to hold a 1-hour event. And I think the Commission needs to be clear on whether its own regulations are satisfied. Mr. Cole gave a run-through of a written submission that he made to the Commission dated July 13th. And I think many of these points have been addressed, but at the end, near the end, section 7, he states it was argued, and I think I was the one being pointed to, it was argued last time that a certificate of location approval is required from the ZBA prior to the Commission's approval of the application. No, what I asked this Commission is why it was appropriate for the applicant to start here when the appellate court had recently ruled in connection with the location approval requirement that the Zoning Board of Appeals, in the absence of any statutory standards since they've all been abolished, has to take into account all relevant factors. And that was the, I believe that case was 1 Elmcroft Stamford LLC versus Zoning Board of Appeals, 213 Connecticut Appellate 200. about, I think it's section 3 of that decision. Might have been 5, but I think it was 3. And so my only point was that if the Zoning Board of Appeals can say that we don't like this for whatever relevant reason, that maybe it's a mistake on the part of the applicant to come here first and use all this time before the commission. But I am not suggesting that there is any requirement that the applicant start there first, just to be clear on that. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Cole referred to this as the elephant in the room. I would refer to it, quite honestly, as a red herring. But let me address it first. The distance between filling stations, and you recall that you have a regulation, and I'll quote it directly, 2.11.2, no gasoline or diesel filling station or automotive service or repair station shall be erected within a 1,500-foot radius of any part of any lot used for these purposes. So Mr. Cole has taken us through an extensive analysis of the history of the use of 54 South Broad Street. And I have to say that the extensive minutes of, I guess, the Zoning Board of Appeals at which Judge Hendel, or Seymour Hendel as he's known here, explained the history of the use of the property is quite persuasive to me. I think that the evidence is strong that the use of the property for gasoline station purposes is quite probably non-conforming. Dates before that, such use dates before the time of your zoning regulations. However, Mr. Cole has taken us off onto the subject of abandonment, and I really can't blame him because I think that there's been a little bit of an excursion that kind of takes us off the mark a bit. But there was reference made to an opinion that was given by Attorney Londrigan, who's not here tonight, obviously, and I don't mean to speak out of school in this respect. He does talk about the role of facts in determining whether abandonment of a non-conforming use has taken place. He says a Connecticut court has held, which unfortunately he doesn't identify, he doesn't give any citation, but let's take it at face value. A Connecticut court has held that removal of fuel storage tanks is not in and of itself evidence of an intent to abandon a use of property as a gasoline station. And of course it is a little funny, and this is where I have my reservations, where Attorney Londrigan then goes on to suggest in the final paragraph that maybe the applicant ought to bring in an affidavit about a prior owner's intention as to the continuity or discontinuance of that use. And Mr. Cole, did provide an affidavit by someone named Jeffrey Buccaro. Is Jeffrey Buccaro here tonight? No. Okay, I just wanted to make sure because we attorneys have a word that we use to describe these kinds of statements that are presented in this manner to the tribunal, which you are. We call it hearsay. And if Mr. Buccaro were here tonight, we could have inquired as to these facts. So I'm going to object on those grounds. Obviously, it's already part of your record. However, Mr. Buccaro in his affidavit and Mr. Cole in his presentation referred to, and in fact, Mr. Cole's report includes a copy of a deed recorded or is it dated October 5th, 2018 from Hendel's South Broad LLC to PMIG, who is the predecessor, I guess, of the current owner.
Yep, I'm familiar with it.
Right, and Mr. Buccaro, I guess, works for this PMG and PMIG and says we didn't intend to abandon any rights of zoning nonconformity. I think we need to look back a little bit further. And toward that end, I'd like to show you, oh, here we are. Problem with this lecture is that they slide off. I'm just going to pull off a copy for myself and also for one for Mr. Cole of something I'll show you next. And then I'll bring these copies up to the commission members. What I'm passing around and asking to be made part of the record, along with everything else I've been presenting tonight, are copies of two sections of the Connecticut General Statutes, section 14-321, and then 14-319. 319 is simple. You have to have a license from the state to sell gasoline. But 14-321 says you need this location approval certification that's been discussed in order to, in effect, qualify for that license. About midway through 14-231, it's pointed out that a certificate of approval shall not be required in the case of the transfer of the last issued license from one person to another, provided that no more than a year has elapsed since the expiration of such license. What I'm passing around now is something that I was able to find as readily as any one of you can find through the facility of the state website, State of Connecticut website, ct.gov. Anyone who is required to have a license, the barber, funeral director, what have you, a person who sells gasoline, are able to, you can look them up through this facility, look up those licenses and see if they're current licenses or when they were issued. And so what I'm passing around is the page that I downloaded from that ct.gov license website. In respect to a license for Hendels Incorporated, 54 South Broad Street, Pawcatuck, Connecticut, license type or credential type, retail gasoline dealer, effective date 11/1/2015, expiration date 10/31/16, status inactive. That is the last issued license I was able to find on this site for the owners prior to PMIG, Hendels, and I certainly, well, I'll just move along and say that excuse me. Here we are. Unfortunately, I've got to disagree with a comment that was made by someone earlier that Attorney Londrigan's synopsis of the law in respect to the discontinuance of nonconformities is, I think, to paraphrase, pretty much says it all. Because what he doesn't address is what your own regulations say on that subject. At 2.6.2, abandonment and discontinuance, and this is in respect to non-conforming use and bulk, 2.6.2 states that, in part, the term abandonment shall mean the voluntary discontinuance of a use, including but not limited to an intent not to reestablish such use by the owner. So far, so good. And then the regulation goes on to say, any one of the following shall constitute prima facie evidence of permanent intent to abandon, which prima facie evidence may be rebutted by the owner. And then under that, at subsection 2.6.2.2, one of those things that, according to your regulations, shall, which you elsewhere define as mandatory, shall constitute prima facie evidence of abandonment, intentional discontinuance of non-conforming use for 12 consecutive months. You do go on to say that shorter temporary interruptions, effectively don't count, don't terminate the right to resume such uses. Well, what I've shown you is that the last license for the sale of gasoline on the site that could be found through a diligent search online that I welcome anyone to repeat for themselves, expired in October 2016, and a deed was shown from Hendel's to PMIG in October 2018, very nearly 2 years later. And I want to relate this back to the statute concerning the location approval. This is a discontinuance for more than a year, or I don't have the language of that statute directly in front of me, but you do. And I explained earlier how it works, that a discontinuance, an expiration of the license, non-renewal for more than 1 year will result in needing to obtain a new location approval from the town. Otherwise, it's good forever. If you keep your license up from year to year, even if you transfer it, you don't need a new location approval, as that statute makes clear. Why would Hendel's not renew their license? Why would they not renew their license, knowing, or at least being on notice of the law, as we all are, that doing so would result in killing, for lack of a better word, their location approval that they had had since about 1963, according to the information from the time that was applied for by Seymour, subsequently Judge Hendel. Your regulation says at 2.6.2 that discontinuance for more than a year, more than 12 consecutive months, is prima facie evidence of permanent intent to abandon a non-conforming use, which prima facie evidence may be rebutted by the owner. So, if we're coming back next month, if the applicants consent to a continuance, show me evidence that, I guess I'm directing my comment to the applicants, show me evidence that Hendel's renewed their license in 2014. 2016, show me that they had a license in 2017 for the site, show me that it was maintained subsequently and transferred to PMIG. It doesn't matter that PMIG, as stated in the affidavit, never intended to intentionally discontinue any zoning nonconformities or whatever the language says. It had already happened. I said to you, however, that the elephant in the room is really a red herring. Because this isn't about use. This isn't about the use of the site as a gas station, which is either allowed or is permitted under the zoning regulations. You all know what a zoning use is. What we're here about, I think one of the central issues is your regulation 2.11.2, no gasoline or diesel filling station, etc., shall be erected within 1,500 feet of another. Now, these terms have meaning in the law. So I consulted a standard reference source, Black's Law Dictionary. And mindful of the fact that your regulation, 2.11.2, has been around for quite some time, as I think research revealed, since the very early 1960s when the regulations were enacted. I looked to the 4th edition of Black's Law Dictionary, which dates from around the same time period. You know, we've been instructed lately by our current Supreme Court majority to look to the original intent of language. Well, whether I've picked the correct dictionary or not, I don't think we need a dictionary to tell us what the word erect means. Erect, according to Black's Law Dictionary, after the part about royal charters, goes on to define erect to mean, as a matter of law, construct. The case cite says that construct is synonymous with erect. And then later on, under erection, right after that, raising up, building, to build, construct, set up. And there's a cite to a Massachusetts case that there, at the end, that there is a distinction between erection and maintenance. I know that you all have a copy in front of you of the staff report that was filed, the most recent one, several days ago in connection with this application. This is just the first page. And nevertheless, I'm submitting it and ask that it be made part of the record. Down at the bottom of the first page, according to the staff, the applicants are seeking a special permit for demolition of an existing building and construction of a new 3,500 foot, or now I guess it's 3,400 foot gas station, etc. They're erecting a gas station. That's the prohibition. It's not the use of the site. The zoning use is the red herring. The prohibition is against erecting a station. It's already a building on the property. It's erected. The building on the property doesn't violate anything. It's already there. We have to assume that your predecessors on this commission back in 1961 knew what the word erect meant, because elsewhere throughout the regulations, the word use is used to denote the use of property. This is different. I don't know what the thoughts were of your predecessors, but that's the regulation they enacted. Unfortunately, and just referring back to the opinion that was provided by Attorney Londrigan, unfortunately he didn't really address that part of the regulations at all, nor the part about your own requirements for proving discontinuity and then shifting the burden as it is to the applicant to rebut. But on the subject of erection, your regulations are very specific. It's prohibited within 1,500 feet of any part of a lot used for gas station purposes. I don't know what more to say on that subject. So thank you very much. And as I said, if the applicant chooses to exercise his right to request that the public hearing, or to consent to a continuance of the public hearing for another month, perhaps we'll have some answers to these questions that have been raised. Thank you and have a good evening.
Question, sir?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
If Londrigan is correct, that the courts have decided that abandonment needs to be a positive step, then it would seem that our regulations about abandonment and prima facie evidence are irrelevant.
Actually, oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to step on your words, sir, but what I tried to point out when I read through 2.6.2 in part was that where it says The term abandonment shall mean the voluntary discontinuance of a use, including but not limited to an intent not to reestablish such use by the owner. That is in perfect accordance with what our courts have said again and again, and as Attorney Londrigan reports. But what he didn't do was to say that you've imposed a further standard, really a procedural standard. You've specified in these proceedings that certain things shall constitute prima facie evidence of a permanent intent to abandon, and that the owner may rebut that prima facie presumption. So you've really adopted a rule of procedure. I would argue, rules that say what constitutes evidence and how the owner may rebut. I don't see anything that is not consistent with what Attorney Londrigan said. I just wish he had pointed out what your regulation says. Now, if your regulation has been overruled by a court, well, you should repeal it by all means. But until such time, I can only expect that the regulations will be applied as written.
What I maybe read in too much into Londrigan's letter was in fact that the courts do overrule our regulation.
Well,
that may or may not be correct.
I can tell you that your regulation has been before the courts long time ago in a case called Burson versus Zoning Board of Appeals, 26 Connecticut Supplement 475 back in 1967. This involved a gasoline station or a proposal in Rocky Hill. The court pointed out there are 3 municipalities that have, well, Rocky Hill's regulation was in effect the same that you have, couched in terms of erection, not use. And while the court noted that there were only 3 towns that it could find that had such a regulation, Rocky Hill, Glastonbury, and Stonington. The court, in relevant part, found that rule to be non-confiscatory, which is to say, if someone was claiming here that I have the right to operate a gas station, the application of that rule takes away that right. You've taken my property unconstitutionally. The court said no, it's a perfectly valid regulation. The facts aren't quite the same as here. In other words, I'm not relying on it as authority as to what you should do in a case where there is a non-conforming use, but it's proposed that the existing erected gas station be demolished and a new one be erected. The court hasn't addressed that. It happens from time to time that in the course of proceedings such as these, someone may take an appeal to the court, and the court will find that regulatory language is in some way infirm, constitutionally, statutorily, what have you. And the fact that it is, Stamford or Bridgeport's regulation at issue in a particular case, can certainly be instructive that for a town that has the same language, you have a similar problem. There's been no evidence brought forward by, or no argument brought forward by Attorney Londrigan or Attorney Cole that your regulations are wrong in that respect. In fact, they've said nothing about it. I can only assume it was an oversight on the part of Attorney Londrigan, but in any case, we're getting a little off track. Point 1, Attorney Londrigan says that the removal of the gas pumps, according to the gas tanks, according to one unidentified Connecticut court, isn't enough. I'm showing you that there's something else. The discontinuance by Hendels, the allowing of their annual license to expire and not be renewed for a period of more than a year, which the relevant statute provides, in effect, voids their location approval. It's hard to imagine that I'm not going to resort to imagination or citation to other logical explanations, as Mr. Cole has done in a few places. Handles, as we all know, was in the gas business for a long time. Presumably, they knew about licensing requirements, location approval requirements, and so forth. They did what they did. Their license expired for more than a year. It negated their location approval. Why would you do that? Unless it was your intention to do that. In combination with the removal of the tanks and their non-replacement for how many years, Mark? Right. I think we've satisfied the requirement of the unidentified court cited by Attorney Londrigan, who said that just the removal of the tanks is not enough. I'd agree with that. We're showing you more. Your regulations say that now the owner, through Mr. Cole, has the opportunity to rebut that evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
good
you. Yeah. Before we get to the rebuttal, I was just going to open it to the public. I jumped the starting gun a little earlier. So before we get to the rebuttal, are there any comments that are not on this sheet for general comments, pro or con of this application? Hearing none. Mr. Attorney Cole, it's yours for the rebuttal.
Thank you. There are a couple points that I want to let my professionals speak to, and then I'll answer any questions that you guys might have as well and address some of the more legal side of things.
Peter Gardner, a couple things I'd like to say. Mr. Temple talked about the plans that we prepared. And he talked about the detail for the fuel tanks that we downloaded from and plunked onto the plan. He wasn't in my office when we met with the Mr. McKinney, who builds these things, who installs these tanks. So I don't know where he got the idea that we downloaded it and plunked it onto the plan. Maybe that's the way he does business. It's not the way we do business. And I also wanted to talk about other things that he had to say. He said an awful lot of times during his discussion, he talked about how he assumes, how he thinks, how he expects. You know, when I went to college, assume was a big word. And the professor wrote it on the board, and I think you all know where I'm going with this. He circled ask, you, and me. So if you're assuming something, that's what I think you are.
Attorney Cole?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's not have any more name calling back and forth, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Proceed.
I apologize for that.
I don't know if it's accepted, but I'll take it for now.
As far as speaking to Mr. Temple, there's no additional requirements to have additional, all of the diagramming to putting where every piping and everything is going with regard to these tanks. We've depicted the tanks. There's nothing in the regulations that require more than that. As far as safety concerns go, I think my client can speak to that pretty well. As far as deliveries at night, I think there was a question earlier about deliveries how common is it to have deliveries at night within the fuel? And maybe you can speak to that real quick, Ahmed, or even Martin. Martin, come here. Just speak to the deliveries at night was the question.
Oh, well, obviously, there is a tank level sensor system in every gas station, but some of the standards industry, the guys stick the tank before they get there. They see how many inches are in the tank. Everybody has a tank chart on their truck. It's common practice. It's been done since the beginning of time. You know, they make sure the delivery gets made. Nobody has lights in their mouth, you know, at least none of my guys do, running around. The light is well, the parking lots are well lit. You know, obviously there's shelters on them so they don't go to opposing property owners, but most of the sites are well lit, and the delivery is made on a standard industry standard. You know, you have 20 foot of hose, and if you get 20 foot from that spill containment manhole, there's a spill containment manhole that's sitting on the top of the tank that'll handle 5 to 15 gallons, whatever's put in there. Any spill that goes in there goes into this containment issue, and it's done. Okay, like I told you earlier, you know, there's overfill alarms, there's positive displacement shutoffs that physically shut the product from going in from the tanker into the truck. If it hits a certain percentage, you know, it's usually 95%, that thing stops. You can't unhook your hose, you can't do anything until you bring the product down in that tank. That's just the way it is. You know, so I understand the safety concerns, but there's nobody running around that pays the kind of insurance we do or haulers do, that are running around the middle of the night dropping fuel unregulated and not sticking tanks and not knowing what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what they do. They do it every day of the week, day in and day out, and that's what we do.
Do the trucks have lights on them?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The whole, where all the valves are lit,
Okay.
where all they're lit. They're very well. And with LEDs,
That's right.
It wasn't as good as it is now. But now
They're
with the
under,
LEDs,
so the whole undercarriage is lit up.
yeah,
I
oh
can
yeah,
see what you're doing.
absolutely.
That's what I thought.
And there's a bar that goes up, so you have to. The brakes lock when you put the bar up, when you hook to it. It's not as. I know everybody thinks it's unsafe, but it's safer than people think it is.
Thank you.
All I say.
Any other questions from?
I have a question for the attorney on
Yes,
loading area. And I'm just looking at Keith's report again, and I guess when I saw the 15 by 50 loading zone, I thought it was implied that that's where the trucks would unload. But I'm looking at your review, Keith, and I see that the loading area would be used for convenience store deliveries and not fuel deliveries.
Right.
That the fuel deliveries would still be made over the tanks.
Yes.
So,
That's my understanding.
And I think he testified to that earlier.
I misunderstood that. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I just wanted to clarify it because, you know, points were made about, you know, there was no information on the drawing about where the fill pipes were for the tanks and that sort of information, and sort of an implication that the filling was going to take place within the loading area, and that would be a fill appliance that is located too close to the property line.
Right.
That's not the case.
No,
The fill's a center line of the tank.
Yeah.
Whatever the center
Got
line.
it. I thought that what was being done with the 15 by 50 loading area along the westerly side was that, you know, in the absence of you know, actually showing where the fill pipe remote fill was, that it was a remote fill, but it's not a remote fill.
And as far, Mr. McKinney's kind of gone into the lighting that is provided at night, and Mr. McKinney, the question that was specifically asked was how common it is to deliver at night.
Every day of the week.
Every day of the week is what he said. So these companies are running 24/7. And so he's testified to the lighting that's provided to provide safety when they're delivering at night. They're doing this as a regular course. If there's a necessity to turn the lights on at night, that could be added as well. We have no problem with that on the nights where there's going to be a fuel delivery. Mr. Temple offered up talked about the retaining wall and offered up a condition that detail be included on the final plans. The applicant has no problem with that. Mr. Chase spoke a bit about about what I apologize, I forget, in the moment I'm forgetting her name, but Commissioner Lynn, I'm forgetting her last name in the moment, that she raised at the last meeting about there being changes to be made. You guys are well experienced with this process and the site plan process that, you know, there are continuances to hearings, things are raised for the first time, and people address those issues. That there might be some incompleteness that up front that precludes the application is erroneous. As far as the certificate of location approval goes, I think we've clarified that issue as to there being no requirement that the applicant seek that certificate of location approval before coming to this commission. It's a matter of choice. And so there's nothing requiring that to happen, even though there may be some court case that has implications when we get to that location approval before the Zoning Board of Appeals. That is for us to address then. It doesn't impact the commission's decision on this application. I'll pause here to take your questions if you have them.
Any more questions?
One question, who determines when deliveries are made?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Who determines, how do you decide when you're going to bring a load of fuel to a gas station?
Mm-hmm.
Does the delivery company decide that? Does the gas station have the ability to say only between midnight and 6 a.m.?
I think the applicant can speak to that. He's asking who decides when the deliveries are made.
Me. We order gasoline delivery, right?
Yeah.
We order gas. I order gasoline every day to all my gas stations. Mostly they deliver at night because, you know, afternoon, evening time is a rush. So all delivery get pending late at night, and they deliver after midnight too. Bunch of station for me.
So it's the operator's decision.
Yes.
Chuck, any more questions?
No more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Jerry? The quiet corner?
Quiet.
Staff, I guess, thank you. I think we're on the staff now.
But with this application, a lot does come down to the abandonment issue, as we've heard tonight, and, you know, we've referenced the town attorney opinion here a lot, which, you know, doesn't come to a conclusion about yes or no, but sort of provides guidance as to making that decision. You know, our department and this commission has not enforced that regulation 2.6 that says that if something's abandoned, if something's unused for 2 years or whatever it says, that it's considered abandoned, just because it does seem to conflict with state statutes. This section of our regulations was last updated in 2010. I think between then and now, state statutes have become even stronger with their defense of non-conforming rights. The statutes were updated to say that even if a building is demolished, it doesn't necessarily prove abandonment. So the state statutes are so strong in protecting someone's non-conforming rights that we basically don't go there, even though our regulations says that. It seems like even if you do look at it as a procedural thing, where the owner has to sort of prove that they haven't abandoned it, you know, that is what the applicants have been trying to do here during this hearing. The minor thing that was mentioned is the walls, the retaining walls over 3 feet, needing an engineering stamp. That is something that will be required during the building permit stage.
Right.
The building official will require an engineering stamp to make sure it's built correctly when a retaining wall is that high. The stormwater has been addressed at both the wetlands and PZC levels by the town engineer, who's reviewed their drainage studies and is very thorough in his review, and he did have comments about the stormwater that were addressed to his satisfaction before this hearing. That's another thing I want to mention is that the staff report mistakenly doesn't mention the town engineer's latest comments of June 23rd, in which he basically says all his previous comments were addressed except for the turning templates. He wanted an illustration of complete turning movement through the site for a vehicle. As we were talking about before, showing how the vehicle can maneuver throughout the site and not just the exits and entrance. Since the last meeting,
I'm sorry, Keith, the town attorney has not gotten his satisfaction on those drawings yet? Is that what you're saying?
town engineer.
Town engineer?
With regards to the turning templates, that's right.
Thank you.
We did receive additional.
His question was not necessarily entry from the street, that's been demonstrated, but that intersite maneuvering, thank you. And intersite turning around the pumps.
Yeah. What happens in the center of the site? How do you?
Right, and whether the truck does have to back up or not, which is a concern which has not been addressed.
Yeah.
So that number is not, you're saying, in your staff report, 1 through 13 have been satisfied to the town engineers, but there's a number 14 that hasn't been, essentially?
It's his number 8 in those comments you're looking at is still not.
Oh, okay, there it is.
Yeah.
Number 8. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we did get comments from the WPCA and Westerly Water that they had no issues with the application. My comments originally on the application have been addressed here. So if this were to be approved, the report has recommended stipulations 1 through 7. And 7 does include that fuel delivery shall be limited to between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m.
Yes.
There were some other things talked about, like final plan shall reduce the size of the building to 3,400 square feet or 68 by 50 feet. Canopy signage shall be limited to 30 square feet with signage not to be above the roof line. And if this were to be approved tonight, there would have to be something about the turning radius demonstration to be met to the satisfaction of the town engineer.
And what about, Chuck brought up the existing sign being in the middle of the sidewalk, future sidewalk. The post, or the leg, I guess it is.
Yeah, that's true. That could be another one. That detached
But if
sign,
it gets moved, does it take away a parking place?
No, there's no parking on that side. I don't think so. Let me take a look right here. I looked, so I
Yes, there are 2 parking places. There are 2.
just see if the 5 feet is they may have to change the size of the sign, or cantilever it over the wall, but they just have to move the posts. got plenty of room to move the post
Okay,
without encroaching on the parking,
so would you?
to be fair.
We could have a stipulation to that, moving the post out of the sidewalk area?
I
That's
think with
fine.
respect to the sidewalk, it's that the sidewalk easement runs from the northwest corner to the northeast corner of the property, which is not clear on the plan, and that the sign will be moved to accommodate the installation of the sidewalk.
That's fine.
Okay.
Well, just to be clear, you said the sign will be moved or will be designed in such a way, you had talked about cantilevering it.
Oh, yeah, if that's done now, that's the best. I mean, cantilever is fine.
If there's a way to reconfigure
It
the
doesn't
sign so it's
it
not,
doesn't interfere, you know, we don't want to put you in some prohibitive thing where we take away a parking place. That's not what we're trying to do. It's to
Be a single post sign.
make sure that the sign doesn't end up in the middle of the sidewalk, you know, which is always a problem.
I think we're still open, so I was briefly gonna, I had said I was pausing for your questions, but I had some more to say. Keith hit on it, Mr. Bryant's hit on it well about this shall not be erected and the prima facie evidence that Mr. Chase raised. Our position would be that this, and has been, that the nonconformity we're referring to is this 1,500 foot distance. And my letter makes clear to the commission that the use of a gas station is allowed in the zone with a special permit. What we're talking about clearly is this 1,500 foot distance. And as Keith mentioned, as I cite in my letter, the statutes do talk about the destruction of a structure, and I mentioned that earlier. The destruction of a structure or a building itself is not evidence of this of abandonment of a nonconformity. What we're dealing with is the intent. And to put a prima facie requirement saying that a 12, as Keith indicated, a 12 month period passage is enough to shift the burden now on the part of the applicant to show intent is to enforce that what the court has said you can't allow, which is that passage of the time alone is not enough. And as Keith said, we put on lots of evidence and lots of argument to address this issue of intent. Mr. Chase brought up the license that Hendel's let lapse. As he suggested, there are other reasons that one might infer why that license might have lapsed during this period when they were renting to someone else, and given the passage of time. But there's no indication that their intent was to permanently relinquish that right. They're merely by letting that license lapse. So if there's nothing further from the commission that you would like to hear or see on this application, the applicant's position is that we have substantially complied with the regulations, and that this project presents an improvement on the location, on the area, in an area that's been used as a filling station for decades, and we would ask your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. So Keith, you still have some material?
No, I think that's it here. And the votes here are a decision concerning the waivers requested and the special use permit.
My question to you is on your application status, you say the hearing must be closed tonight without a further extension by the applicant. And then you go on to say the longest this hearing could be kept open with the maximum extension is 8:25. So you're saying we could keep it open to 8:25?
If they grant us an extension to do that. it could go that far.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess that the question before us is, do we close or do we want to ask for an extension for more information to be clarified, such as turning radiuses or funnelization of the right-hand turn, or we just close and, or we close the meeting and we can vote tonight, or we could vote some other time.
Seems to me that most of the things that we're still waiting on are approval from town officials. Right?
Such as?
The turning radius diagram.
I think that's a pivotal question that the town engineer really should look at. You know, and he's got the, do we have the AutoCAD plans yet? It's much easier to overlay a turning radius template when you have an AutoCAD plan.
I don't think so unless the town engineer has them.
We always get AutoCAD plans after approval, right?
We do with subdivisions.
I'm sure the applicant would, but I mean, to me,
Well,
the question as to whether that vehicle can maneuver on site, once it turns in, I think they've demonstrated that a WB-50 can turn in. Question is a WB-50 the right vehicle? And can that maneuver on site to get into position without backing up across the property line?
Well, that begs the question also about, is the WB-50 the vehicle of choice now?
Right, right. So, I mean, that is sort of a pivotal question.
And do we
Not
put,
sort of, it is.
but is that made into a stipulation, or do we wait, want to keep it?
Well, then you're putting the town engineer in a position, I think, where he is gonna deny an application if he finds that it can't be done.
Right.
We've approved an application and the town engineer, you know, has,
Yeah.
I would prefer to, you know, reconcile that issue, or at least from my perspective, it is such a critical issue.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps the applicant's engineer can work with the town engineer to, you know, assist to, you know,
Well,
make that determination.
Right. So
Would that
yes,
being the case, we'd have to request an extension from the applicant.
correct.
We'd have to request, and if they don't grant it, then we're in a position where we have to act on it.
Right. Okay.
What do you think, Gary?
Yeah, we asked for the extension.
And to be clear, if they don't grant the extension, you'd have to close the hearing tonight, but you wouldn't have to decide tonight. You still have 65 days to
Understood.
decide if you need more time.
Could we get the attorney's opinion in that time, or is that evidence that would not
Attorney or town engineer?
be attorney?
Attorney also, yeah.
Would that, you couldn't get that after the hearing's closed, or you could?
Technically you can. You can get comments from staff. So what would be asking the town attorney?
I'm a little fuzzy at the moment, but I think I could come up with something.
Okay.
There are a lot of questions floating around for me to.
So just so I'm clear, your question is to have the town attorney rule on some of these issues that have been brought up. I think it's a good idea
I need to
also.
digest it and come up with a
Yeah.
clear question. Which
Right.
At the moment, at 10:15, I can't.
It would be far better than having to imply from what he's written.
Yeah.
If he could be more specific about what how the state views abandonment. Because we've been using essentially that very high standard for a long time, where we've had to do drive-throughs and other kinds of, had to approve them where we would rather not, because of our understanding that the
Illegal, yeah.
legal
Legally
definition
challenged.
of abandonment is so stiff that we basically had no choice. It'd be good to have a little bit of a explanation from the town attorney with appropriate citings and that sort of thing, so that we can have it at hand and supply it to applicants going forward.
So let's, first off, I think we should ask if we can get the extension.
Yep.
And then if not, we'll go ahead with getting our advice from the attorney as a staff report. Okay.
Okay,
Is that,
I'm good with that.
so,
Yeah, I'm good with that too.
so Attorney Cole,
Yes.
would you grant us an extension to keep this hearing open?
Yes, my question would be for how long does the commission need? And point of privilege, I'm out of the state for much of August, so just a matter of what is the next hearing you anticipate scheduling this for? I know there's one currently scheduled for the 2nd and another scheduled for, I assume, the 16th?
16th. Honestly, both dates are difficult with our schedule because the next meeting we have the cannabis regulation. In the meeting after that, we have 2 pretty significant applications. So I guess, well, if you're only here the 2nd, I guess it'll have to be the 2nd.
I'd leave the morning of the 10th, so the 9th would be available.
Mhm.
And then if you need more of that time that's left over, we'll address it at that point. Or if prior to the meeting it looks like you're still waiting on comment.
What else is on the 2nd?
That's it for hearings, is the cannabis regulation. But because we can't take a long time on that because the moratorium will be ending.
Right.
Well, Keith, if
But
we
it's either
close the public hearing, we can still have the town engineer review it. And we can still have the
Town
town attorney review it.
Okay.
And we get their reports, and it's just that they're taken up in regular session, and I always prefer to allow for public comment. It's, you know, a sense of fairness to both sides.
It's difficult because, you know, they won't be able to update any plans or anything like that.
Right.
You know, if there is an issue with the turning.
So the issue is you're out of state on the 16th?
On the 16th, if I can adjust my schedule if it is necessary for the commission. Don't make this decision based on my schedule.
Okay.
We're
No, I'm looking at Keith.
my duties to my applicant.
I'm looking at Keith and the town planner's schedule.
Yeah, like I said, both meetings are difficult in different ways.
Right.
You know, the 16th has 2 large hearings. 2nd has cannabis. You know,
What's the
maybe
next
we
meeting
can.
after that?
First one in September, which would be
No,
too
we're
late.
Okay.
It's past the time limit.
Okay.
You know, I guess we can go for the August 2nd and hope for the best and hope there's enough time to deal with the cannabis issue. And, you know, maybe if there needs to be a special meeting to deal with one of these, we might have to do that in August.
Well, if we do close it, are we comfortable with getting the town engineer and the town attorney as staff reports? And that's it. And
I
then
think
we'll
we should
vote on that.
crystallize some of the issues that have been discussed here and debated tonight.
Right.
To try to get
With that.
clarification between the representations of both attorneys and as to how, you know, the town attorney advises on those issues.
I guess what I'm saying is I'm okay with closing the hearing and getting that. Holding the vote till we vote on the 2nd.
So, right.
Would that give enough time with the engineer and the attorney to give us?
Sorry, if we close the hearing tonight, you said?
If we close the hearing tonight, and will they be able to give us advice by the 2nd so we can vote at that meeting?
Maybe. I mean, the town engineer, I guess what I'm getting at is the town engineer already did provide his comments, which is that it wasn't really satisfactory. So I guess the hearing has to be open to give them an opportunity to show to the town engineer that this works. So they still need to provide more information.
I think it's best to
Keep it open.
keep it open and to allow, you know, both sides to continue to comment.
I think we have to.
Okay,
Yeah, can't make a decision now, so.
okay. So let's try to shoehorn it in on the second, August
Yeah.
2nd meeting?
Yeah,
Maybe we
we'll
can
do
do that before the cannabis?
Yeah.
I'll bring the Gatorade at 9 o'clock break.
So we're clear. Yes, you have we will grant an extension to the second.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So meeting adjourned.
Let's make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Fred. We have a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Motion seconded. Meeting adjourned.
You're not gonna find it.